with the work session this evening. Dr. Ian will be joining us virtually at some point, and Mr. Marley will be here shortly, one can assume. So, but we have a lot to get through. Oh, and Amy Matthews hit traffic, so she'll be here when that clears up. The first policy we need to look at tonight is A300. Dacia submitted some clerical type corrections that Church and Church was fine with, so that is our only proposed change. And you can pull up the two and compare them if you need to, but I didn't see any real substantive difference in what you proposed, Dacia, versus what was suggested by Church and Church. So I will entertain, no, we're not doing that yet because that's an hour from now. Does anyone have any comments about the corrections to A300 that, go ahead, Dacia.
So the three changes, two of them, Ms. Matthews had said that legal counsel would actually make the changes so that they lined up what their intent was.
Okay.
And so like the first one, I think, I mean, if it's what my view is, we should just strike that line. The last one, I had been under the impression it wasn't all staff, that they were going to change the wording, but I haven't ever seen anything included. So this isn't necessarily my recommendation that I think we should be doing, if that makes sense.
So if you pull up suggested revision -A300, responsible use of technology, and
Right.
that's not what you wanted it to say?
So when I had brought it up last month, the first line where it says sign this user agreement, I don't see the point of saying this user agreement. When we're doing this policy, it should relate to anyone that is using technology, not just someone that's going to sign a user agreement.
Okay. Well, if we have questions for Amy, then we should wait until she gets here. Do all the students sign a user agreement as well as all the staff when they begin using computers in kindergarten? I would think that that's, yeah. So I'm not sure who wouldn't be covered by that. Rachel?
I think that it just is a simple language change that says signing user agreement. I think that for me, this is a little bit more broad in that if somebody comes on to property, logs onto the public Wi-Fi and does something that's inappropriate, they would also presumably be subject to this policy. Okay. So I think that's a worthwhile, Brandon's nodding his head. So that's my concern, is that that would be a possibility. And I'm not sure how this policy covers that. I have concern at the bottom on item 14, saying that students and staff shall receive annual training on social media, that adding of staff. Mm-hmm. And I feel like we have a lot of training that we ask of our staff, and asking them to click through another annual training. They're adults and professionals. So I just feel like we need to be cautious about adding additional trainings.
Okay.
By policy. So that's, I mean, students are youth. They do come in every year, complete the agreement every year. I don't know how much time that training is going to take, but Dr. Reiner, about how many hours do our staff spend a year in their mandatory trainings already?
We've reduced it some. What do you think the overall time period is now? I don't know, Rachel. Mrs. White. Yeah.
Oh, we're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, we have offered now that option. So there is a test out option now that we have set up in state school. So if it's a repeated training, if it's not the first time, they should be pretty familiar with it. They can go to the test out, take the test, as long as they pass. If they don't pass, then they do have to go back in and take the training.
So I thank you for doing that, because I think it's a huge burden on some of our team to have to do this continually, but this would say they will receive annual training, and I don't know that it's clear that it would be a test out option.
Repeated training, yeah, they
There she is.
trending in the right
Hi, how are you?
I have a problem putting in corporation policy. I think we just need to be aware of how much training we're putting into policy. This just concerns me a little bit.
Well, and I wonder if when you all put in those staff members on A300 at the end where it talks about training, if that was supposed to point to a certain subset of new staff members perhaps, and a word was
staff
omitted.
members who- More than likely, staff members who are either working with students directly, I think that's probably, usually when we talk about training, and that was in, you said A300?
Yeah,
Some
under-
Technology.
14, Daisha had suggested we change it to all students and staff members. And Rachel's concern is adding training to an already burdensome training amount.
Those staff members are, with it being A300, the technology
Yeah.
policy, it's those staff members who work with kids on technological devices. So for
Okay.
example, a child nutrition staff member would not have anything to do with working with kids in technology. So there'd be no reason to train them on that.
Got it. Okay.
So just to clarify, this is where we were at last month. And when we walked away, my understanding was legal counsel was going to recommend how to adjust that. It's not that I'm thinking we need to include all staff members. That's not what I'm doing. I'm just wanting it to be very clear
Who's in?
who's in it. And my
included.
understanding is we were going to get that. And so that's where that one is at, is waiting to find out, do we put in quotations, whatever we need to add, but right now where it stands to me isn't clear.
I see. Okay, and I'm looking back through. I don't think there was.
Let me look at my sent, because I feel like I emailed something.
You updated it with the URL to be correct, and I think with all of the different changes that might have been missed. So is there language we can agree on where we could say something along the lines of, rather than all students and staff members, say all students and staff members, all students, comma, and staff members who work with
students
students.
on technological applications.
Okay. How do I comment that? There we go.
You need a bit, sorry.
I'm raising my hand.
Go ahead.
Does a test out option work, comply with policy?
Does a test out?
So if teachers were very experienced with this and they're safe schools and they are able to test out of this particular training, does that qualify as annual training?
Well, I mean, if they have access to it and have demonstrated mastery, and we have the documentation of that,
Yes, they come off under the printed report saying
Okay.
they passed it.
Yeah.
They test out.
then that would
Okay.
count as the training, yeah. Perfect.
Yep, thank you, that's,
Okay, and to return to the user agreement question, in the very first section where it says use of any and all technological resources is a privilege, blah, 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 and the responsibilities associated with signing this user agreement. The concern was about people who may come in and sign into the Wi-Fi and do terrible things, and they have not signed a user agreement. So should we broaden that to include anyone who is on the Wi-Fi? Or,
Yeah, if you're able to incorporate even a scroll down type login system, that's best practice as well.
where
So
it has
they
the
would-
user agreement right there when you
Yeah,
log
and
in?
you have to at least scroll down to log in. If you can't do that, then at least changing that so that you're not implying that everybody's getting a user agreement if they are.
Okay.
That'd be a plan B.
Yeah, I wouldn't think that somebody who is signing in to do nefarious things would bother to check our policies first.
Correct.
the way I interpreted that was that when you sign the user agreement, it's because you need that service and it
You're gonna
could be
a regular
removed.
User versus
Right,
a guest who's coming in one time.
right. So, I guess, was it signing a user agreement that you wanted that to say, or?
I mean, I think ideally, so I know I'll go to Brad because it's, I think ideally is, can we just remove that? Like, why does our technology policy need to even talk about the user agreement? What is my question with that?
And I would say so that you acknowledge and commit to having a user agreement.
I see. Did you catch that? It's to reinforce that there is a user agreement that we shall
So if you
use.
want to have it say, rather than this user agreement, if you want to have it say a user agreement, it doesn't have, there's not one particular magical one
Mhm.
that you have to use.
That's fine. I mean, this user agreement seemed inaccurate and the other way is fine.
Okay,
The first time you log in,
is there? Okay, cool.
Then that's perfect.
That works. Okay,
Thank you.
so if we make those two changes, is everyone amenable on A300, or does anyone have any other issues with it? Because that's the one that informs the, or responds to that law that they
Yes,
changed.
your wireless communication device A301, you have to have an A300.
Right, so they're all kind of up a piece. Yes, Rachel?
I don't have a problem with it. I just want to make sure that everybody's aware that there's one change to this that is kind of different from our current, which is virtual instruction.
Okay,
It's just a little bit more broad than it has been. I don't have a problem with it, but I just want to make sure that everybody knows that that is being changed significantly.
You mean the responsible use of virtual instruction section
In
7?
the past, we just did not do, like during the COVID land, we did not do virtual instruction because of concerns about student privacy and disciplinary issues that might come up, et cetera. I am fine with adding it. I just want to make sure everybody knows that we're changing. That's a substantial change on here that could go unnoticed.
And it certainly does not require, if you're not doing virtual instruction right now, it certainly doesn't require that you do any.
right.
It's conditions of if there is.
If
So
there's
it's-
another pandemic and we have to,
Yeah.
then we have a
Yeah.
policy. So,
It just, yeah,
Okay.
I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure everybody knows we're doing that right now.
Okay.
That's it.
okay. Yes, go ahead.
So last month, we had talked about, Rachel had asked that something be added about students not required to have cell phones last month into this, and I haven't seen that. And then also the update of the AI policy said that it would be in this before we approve it, and I hadn't seen that either. So I
It's not
didn't
a policy, it's AI language that I sent.
And so I haven't seen any of that.
All it is it adds assistive technology. Sorry, I've been spending a lot of time in student world today. In artificial intelligence, it adds it essentially to the things about which you have to be responsible. So that should be the version that you adopt.
This is internet use, though. We're not in the phone policy yet, correct?
Right,
Yeah,
but-
that's
Yeah,
G350.
but it should be in this one. Artificial intelligence should be in this one as well,
Okay.
because it's a type of technology that's used. This is the overarching umbrella policy. The other one is just for
The cell phone use not being mandated is in
Correct.
the cell phone policy,
Correct,
not
yeah.
this policy. Okay.
Okay, so everybody's cool with 300?
So I'm not, I haven't seen what the changes are, so I'm not cool with, I mean, AI, actually ISBA recommended that you put a whole task force together to talk about what you're gonna have your AI policy. So no, I'm not comfortable with saying I'm good with it when I haven't even.
Have
read
you
it.
seen G350?
Yes, and it doesn't talk about AI.
It doesn't. I thought that's where it was.
no, it would be an A300.
It would be. Okay. So we need to,
But all it does is literally add the word artificial intelligence as a type of technology to, and there should be a comment that says, it's nearly impossible to prohibit it. So you've got to put it into the umbrella of things that you're going to do. And along the lines of where you were saying task force, we would recommend you do that more for a handbook, because it is a very specific and ever-changing thing that you would put in handbooks.
Okay, Rachel.
So I'm reading it, and 3 definition of terms used. It says technology means computers, computer systems, public and private networks such as the internet, artificial
Yep, there it
intelligence,
is.
including language generation tools and large language models.
Okay,
So to me, it's in definition of technology,
That's
which is
correct.
where you
Where
would
it's supposed to
look
be.
for it. Yeah.
Yep, then you have the right version.
great.
And
Go
then I
ahead.
have another question. So currently, the updated list that lists what we'll be replacing with this isn't actually accurate. So,
Hang on, let me pull that up first so that I know what you're talking about.
And you're referring to the one just sent
yes.
yesterday?
Let's see. I'm getting bogged down in files. Let's try here. Policy review, crosswalk. Okay, and you're looking at line 9, all of those different policies. What's the problem?
So some are not included. So for example, we talked about 753001 is not included in this one, 513601. So we have several policies in place that's not listed on here. So I don't feel comfortable passing a policy when we have other policies that may contradict it that we're not pulling.
Okay, can I take a look at the policies that you're referencing?
Yeah, I can share what I found, but I have not gone through every West Lafayette policy to see what are technology, and that had been my understanding is what we were going to be getting so that we could clearly know where policies are.
There are some that you're gonna need to do at the end, once you know what your comprehensive system
Right.
looks like, and there are some that we're not gonna recommend deletion right now because they may not be that closely related and you may make changes. So what we put in there are the core ones that connect most closely. So if there was one missed, it was because we made an interpretation that it didn't seem to us that it was necessarily gonna fall under that. But I did use the actual policy.
And I appreciate the ones that before, we had ones that we didn't have, so that got updated, so I appreciate that made it clearer. But there's, like 5136 talks about our specific policy. So I don't know how we leave that one in place if this actually is a different policy.
What's it called? What's 5136 called? And I'll pull up your policy list.
Technology resources and other electronic equipment.
Yeah, so if I saw that title,
Mhm.
technology resources and other electronic equipment, I would not necessarily know that that wouldn't belong in your facilities because of the word equipment. That would have been why I wouldn't put it there. Because that may not be about technological use, but things like we update our computers every 3 years, which is not a responsible use of technology. So that, I can tell you right now, that's why I wouldn't have put it in there, is because of the word equipment.
Okay, and I sorry, there's so many numbers. Trying to find the one that.
While she's looking for that, is it fair to assume that when we get to the end of this process and have put these in place, that we will look at everything left and make a
Absolutely.
decision about that at that time?
Yes, absolutely. And if at the end you think, oh, we originally thought we might delete this, but looking at how it ended up, we'd like to keep this one policy, you can always add it back.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, sorry.
But I don't want to have you over delete at the beginning.
Makes sense. Thank you.
5136 without the 01 is actually the one that is what I'm concerned about.
What's that one called?
It's called personal communication devices.
That would be deleted, that should be deleted with 301, not with 300.
So I didn't see that. That 301's actually not on here.
It's the brand new one.
Yeah, this is the one I got that they shared just today.
Okay, well, since I already sent it to you, maybe in my mind, I just didn't put it on there, but that one should be, so apologies at that mistake, but that should be deleted with 301,
Okay,
because 301 is wireless communication devices.
And also, policy 3363, they're talking about recordings. I think we have recordings in this A300. So is that one supposed to be listed here? on
No,
the
there's
crosswalk?
gonna be a separate recording policy as well.
We have separate,
Yes.
Yep, that's
The G
G1,
series.
their G series. So we list that over there, G something,
G350.
and we have, okay.
And that's the third one. We need to do a first reading on that one tonight at the meeting so that we can get that in place before July. It's almost as though the policies all kind of work together as a unit, and the longer this takes, the more holes there are going to be. So I think it would be a good idea to remember that by drawing this process out, we are opening the district up to liability that's unnecessary. And that maybe we should have a little faith in our representation and their professionalism and ability to do this. So can everybody agree to a 300? Is there any other issue with that? Because I'd like to vote on that tonight. Cool, okay.
Wait,
I'm gonna-
we're voting on it tonight?
Yes, it's been under first reading since February, and we need to get a policy in place and move forward because the law takes effect in July. And so we can make the changes that you've suggested that everyone thinks are a good idea and go forward with voting on it tonight. Can't we? We can.
So my
Ma'am?
oh, go ahead, please.
Sorry. So my understanding today is kind of first reading, right? For, we vote for whatever the change we made. And then next month, we will be kind of second reading, we will finish voting for
If
this
we
whole
do that,
policy.
we're never going to get through these. We have to be a little more nimble than that, I think. Don't you agree, Amy? Or do we need to do another first reading if we,
I
Change
mean,
words.
really, by law, you don't even have to do a second reading. It's just a tradition and due diligence thing to do a second reading. So if you've already had a first reading, which, as you said, you did in February, then you could do a second reading and a vote tonight as
Okay.
a matter of legal and Robert's Rules of Order.
okay, yeah.
As I understand it, we are going to be changing about 6 words on this, and I have not heard from any community members with concerns. I don't know if anyone else has, but I would be comfortable voting on it tonight.
Okay, great. Are you comfortable voting on it tonight?
So I'm fine voting on this one. I think my problem is the process. What was explained is when we make any changes to a policy, we will present that at the regular meeting that we're making changes, inform the community like we did with the discrimination one. To me, that was a very clear, we told the community, here's our changes, we're voting on it next month. And that told the community up 1 month. Right now, we've been talking about A300. They were going to add some AI wording. Are we going to train all staff? Like I said, is this one to me fine, but when we get to A301, it's the process that I have the issue with of just saying, just pass this. That's not,
That's not what we're saying at all. I've taken all of your suggestions and we've
Right.
incorporated them and we've discussed them. And I don't think you understand that the law changes on July 1st. We
Right.
don't have an infinite amount of time. So I understand you're frustrated with the process, but the fact is that I can't get anyone who will work with you during the time that the office would like to do the work of the policy committee, because they don't want to do this process with you in a room alone and they don't want you to write about it. That's the fact. So you're the one who's drawing this out. You're the one who's making the process difficult here. So I'm sorry you don't like it, but we have stuff we actually have to do on a timeline. And other policies that don't have a law change, that don't have a timeline, I'm happy to do 97 readings if you want. This can take the rest of our lives if you choose to make it that way. But this one has a deadline that we need to respect. And also it feeds into the handbooks, which need to be adopted. So it's not just an intellectual exercise. Real people have to do real work that this is affecting, and we need to move forward. Do you understand?
I do. And to clarify, if we do it at policy committee, it's actually not behind closed doors. Policy committee, it would be an open door. So it would be the same as this. And then the second point is that the process is what we're talking about, and skipping details of the process is a big deal. We are not at July. But like I said, I'm fine if you want to move forward with A300, but when we haven't given our community a heads up of a month, That to me is very important, and being consistent with that.
Have you
is what
heard
my point is.
anything from the community about any of the policies we're discussing?
So I'm sharing about the process. That's what I'm talking about.
I'm
So
super interested in that. Would you please share whether or not you have heard from a
that's not my
community
point.
member?
My point is informing the
Because my
community.
point is
So-
that if you have, that person needs to be referred to myself or Dr. Greiner, not handled by you and dealt with privately. If you're receiving community feedback that's germane to the policies, that's not something you can keep secret from everybody. Everyone deserves the right to hear that person's feedback firsthand rather than it just being whispered behind closed doors. Because I can sit here and say, the community's come to me and said they want us to approve all the policies at once because it's very confusing to have two sets. And I can make things up if I choose to. I'm not saying you are, I'm saying I could. So if there's feedback coming to a board member, the correct thing to do in that situation is forward it to the rest of the board. And I have not seen anything from the community in your entire tenure here. So are you receiving community feedback on the policies?
So what I brought up is the process that you proposed and that I would like us to follow that process. That's all I've said about this topic. So this has nothing to do with community feedback.
Rachel.
The situation has become rather inflamed. I want to offer to you, Mrs. Mumford, that the reason that it has become inflamed is that you chose to write a rather scathing review of our board chair's leadership on this matter, calling it disorganized and chaotic. You might expect if you write those words about the chair of the board and distribute them to the public, that she might have a negative response towards you. I have yet to hear you offer any process or procedure that you think would be orderly and good, just a lot of negativity about what is in place. So do you have another system that you could see that would work? I would really like to hear it because I know I've sat in that chair and it's real hard to just get beat up and not respond to it. So if you've got something positive to offer, it would be a great time to do it.
Great. So it would be helpful if on the agenda we listed the policies that we'll be reviewing so that we can be prepared to know which ones are we discussing in what order at this work session instead of just we have 25 policies, we don't even know what we're discussing. When we get to the regular meeting, it would be helpful if we listed what policies we're planning on voting so that it's
We
very
can't do
clear.
that because we don't know what we're going to get through. It's 5:30 and we've discussed one. So we can't make a list of what we need to do because it's changing. And it changes based on what Indianapolis does and the needs of our central office and our teachers. I would love to be able to say, we're going to do these 10, but I have no faith that we're ever going to get through 10 in one night. So aside from that, is there anything else you think we should do?
No, I mean, there's a way to do this and have the accurate information, but we're not willing to address this. So I say, let's just move on with the policies that we can and move forward.
Okay, I'm letting you all know that I intend to bring this to a vote, including the changes in the meeting. Let's look at A301. Sure.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand. So this month is May, so we vote for all the changes. And then next month, June, we can vote for this policy. The starting time is July 1st, right?
I don't think leaving it till the last minute when it's a matter of legal liability is a very smart idea with this group.
Okay.
I think we need to have a buffer of at least a month because the July meeting is scheduled after July 1st. It's not on July 1st. So we have this meeting and we have June, and that is all. And I did not know coming in here, because communication has been really poor, whether or not anyone was going to have substantive changes that would require another meeting. I'm saying that this is 6 words, like Rachel said, and we can go ahead and vote on it tonight because we need to get it in place so that our people can do their work. Is that more clear?
No, I'm just trying to clarify. So in case that technically that's doable, right? We can vote the change this month, and next month we can vote for the policy.
Yeah, we're not voting on
No,
the
I mean,
changes. We're making the changes
you can
and
do
voting on
now,
the
but I'm
policy.
just wondering, technically speaking, that's still doable.
I mean, technically, we could vote on it in December and leave the corporation open to liability for 6 months.
No, we don't want to feel
Right.
to meet the deadlines.
Well,
And
and
just say-
I don't think that it's wise to do
Okay.
something at the last minute with
Okay.
the way things have
That's
been.
fine.
Yes,
That's fine.
Rachel.
I just want to make sure that I understand. This is the hub, the A300 document, the one that we actually are legally required to pass is the next one. Is that right?
Is the next 301 also?
301.
The A301 falls underneath, the
Right.
larger umbrella is A300. So that's why.
That's why we
You're
need-
doing A300 first.
Yes.
Because you can't pass A301 that refers to something you don't have.
That's correct. That's what I was trying to
Right.
get at, is that if we don't pass this one tonight, the one that is a little bit more difficult and has a lot more change for us is 301, and we need to get into that one and get that one passed in time. So
Right.
while it might seem like, oh, we can just wait another month, the reality is that the one we actually really have to pass to be legally compliant, we haven't even started talking about yet tonight.
Exactly. So let's go there. I like it. I'm going to open it. One moment. Because there were several changes. No, there weren't any yet, but we've done the first reading on this one. So this is the wireless communication device policy. There were a lot of notes in the margin on this one. That's what I meant. Okay, Daisha, do you have concerns about A301?
So last month when we left the meeting, we had talked about that currently we have policies in place, K through 6, which is different than 7 through 12. You had asked the principals to share input. I haven't heard anything, so I don't even know where we stand on recommendations to begin.
You were planning on raising that during your board meet, or your team meeting with the principals.
Concern is the ability, if depending on what you're allowing or not allowing, there's a larger influx of students with Apple Watches and similar devices, and that would be hard to monitor, and that becomes difficult for them, is one thing that they share.
Okay. Hi, Rachel.
Well, I was just going to say that is in the handbook language where it states specifically for the elementary school that all those devices, including Apple Watches, are to be stored and not used at all during the instructional day.
Cool.
So that is, I mean, that's the principals have communicated with us via their handbooks, which is how they communicate.
Okay. Does that satisfy your,
No, I don't. So our handbooks right now and our current policy match. What was just shared doesn't match with either of them.
no, what
So I'm
was
not
shared,
understanding.
the concern about Apple Watches is addressed in the K through 6 handbook, which says they shall not be used.
Right? So then that means we're putting all that in our policy?
We don't need to. They're already taking the liberty of putting it in the handbooks without us specifically calling out every device, because Apple Watches are not the only ones. So if we call out Apple Watches, do we also have to have Samsung watches and Lenovo watches and every other brand of computer? I think knowing that our administrators are capable of generalizing the policy to a set of rules that can be followed in the handbook is enough information about that, don't you?
So currently we have a policy 5136. It has different guidelines for wireless communication devices K through 6 and 7 through 12. I would like to see our current policy line up with that, with what we're currently doing.
And did you submit any suggestions to that effect?
I didn't, because I've never heard anything follow up of what you even said, what the principals shared. So I didn't know where this stood. I
Where's,
didn't know if the principals recommended that we put this in the policy, if they want the whole thing scratched from both. I haven't ever heard anything.
well, if they have not raised that as a concern, I think there isn't an issue, but what number was it, 5136?
Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
This first sentence is pretty clear. Generally, no student may use a wireless communication device during instructional time pursuant to Indiana law. I mean, that's what it says very clearly. The instructional time, then the exceptions are as specifically permitted by a teacher for education purposes, in the event of emergency to manage healthcare, that's clearly laid out in this policy, or because of their IEP or 504. It is, this places it says we are going to comply with the Indiana Code, which is the role of the board. And it places the authority for interpretation and application in the schools in the handbook at the principal's preference and direction, which is the role of our administrative team. So to me, this policy, our current policy overstepped that barrier between what the school board's role is and what the administrator's role is. This one lines up with what those two roles are.
Yeah, and then what you just mentioned as handbook language goes along with the as specifically permitted for educational purposes.
Yeah.
That your educators can say, what do we consider to be the appropriate educational purposes or not, and how do we implement this policy?
And what makes me comfortable with both this dialogue is policy keeps us aligned to the law, and the board still has oversight or input on the handbooks because the handbooks are taken to the board. So
Correct.
I feel like you guys could give your input if necessary.
So I view this one as quite different in that in the handbooks, our administrations have control of how are they going to dismiss kids? Are they going to have snack time? Are they going to do birthday parties? To me, that seems very appropriate handbook interactions with the educators. In regards to our policy on personal cell phone devices, this to me is a community decision of how we want to handle this, and that's appropriate to go to the school board and make that decision, not each individual person have to go to the principal for this one. And so I would like this to be, these policies are our community's policies. They're not just legal counsel's policies. And so our community, I would like to be involved in what the limit of personal communication devices are in our schools.
And if I can clarify, they're not our policies. We recommend them for you. They're the
Right.
school board's policies. And so we give you guidance about the legalities of creating policies and best practices to avoid liability and to avoid challenges that we've seen other places.
And I think this returns to the discussion we've had before about the difference between a governing body and a representative body. We are a governing body. That is different from a representative body. We're not going to run our policies through opinion polls in order to set them, because nothing will ever get done. So, yes, Rachel.
I was just going to say, we don't, for example, have a policy that says that our teachers should wear underpants every day, but presumably they do so because they're professionals. I think it's fair to say that our school administrators are going to set policies that are suited to the clientele that they serve and best suited to that. So I'm very comfortable with this policy it is written, and I'm very comfortable with legal advice on it. I don't agree that our policies are community policies. While I absolutely welcome community feedback on them, I also know that we were elected for a purpose, and that was to make decisions that would best protect the school corporation. And this is one of those scenarios where we have to do that. So I'm not trying to obscure it. I'm just saying we should allow our administrators to do their jobs.
Thank you. Any other comments on A301? Okay, I also intend to bring this for a vote. We had the first reading back in April, and we have not changed it, so we're going to do that. And then we're going to do our first reading on A350. Did everyone have a chance to review that? I'm sorry, G350. Numbers are hard. That was the newest one, which may not be in the right folder.
It's there.
Is it there? Okay, great. Okay. Are there any issues with A350 that we need to discuss prior to the meeting tonight?
Yes,
Someone,
I have a question.
okay.
You mean G350?
G350, darn it, I'm gonna get
Yeah,
that
that's-
by the end. I'm gonna write it down now.
So the first part I would like to understand, so I was reviewing other school districts that have used your the recommended policies. Some chose to use this, some did not. So how do school districts, I still am not clear on some of these where it's not straightforward, why some chose not to put this in place
I'm not
and
aware of
others.
that. Almost everybody, I can't think of anybody I worked with that didn't. What may have happened is over time, we have evolved. For example, there was a policy that was in C, because when we did the Neola, the conversion from the Neola policies, it was listed in the student section. But it was really more about how our staff treat students. So we moved it to the HR, the human resources part section. So schools that we worked with who went through the conversion earlier, many of them still had it in the student section, which is fine. It's, not that big of a deal. I suspect that what you may have seen is something similar,
Right.
where at some point this was a part of a different policy, but we have not ever had a school, to my knowledge, and with all the ones I've been working with, say they did not want to do a policy like this. It just may be a matter of, it could have been located in another place.
Go ahead. Another question I have is our current policy 3363 feels like it's directly with this, yet isn't listed as a policy that we are changing. So I wondered how that works out.
Well, I've gotten a whole list now, so can you give me that number again?
3363.
Thank you. $33.63, recording in the workplace. That would be because of the word workplace.
Okay.
That would connect it to being more of an HR policy. Whereas this is in the G section, which is facilities. So this is more of an overall. Now, is it gonna be my recommendation that you delete that recording in the workplace? Yes. But I wouldn't have necessarily recommended the deletion under this. However, if you want to delete it under this policy, that is fine by me.
So help me understand, in here we talk about employees recording in the workplace.
But it's everybody. This
Right.
applies to everybody,
Right.
not specifically HR focused.
But my question is, we pass a policy that involves employees recording in the workplace, and we have a different policy somewhere else that's not replacing it. Why? I mean, this is involved in that same
This
policy.
is the big umbrella. The one
Right.
you were talking about before is specific to employees. So what I'm saying is if you want to go ahead and delete that employees in the workplace, because it is not on the list that we would have you maintain.
Right.
Right.
The point at which you delete it or the policy with which you delete it matters not at all. Doesn't matter at all.
And they're
As
not
long as in the end you got-
conflicting,
Nope.
so
As long-
they both say the same thing. They
Yeah.
can both exist for a moment in time.
Yeah, but if you want to go ahead and delete it, that is just fine.
Yeah.
So that you don't have it to mess with later. I'm happy to have you add it to your deletion list.
The problem with the previous policies, Dacia, was 3363 was employees recording each other. And 4363 was support staff recording each other. And 5363 was students. And that's what we're eliminating, is the redundancy of having multiple policies.
Which I support. I am very uncomfortable with the way that we're just saying we're leaving policies in place and we're not matching them with what they're being replaced with, where we do have policies that contradict it. It's not a very transparent, organized, there's policies that we have in place that doesn't line up with anything that's being proposed. That stays to the end. That's very clear to me. But something like this that's talking about recording in the workplace and we're replacing it with about a recording in the workplace, I think these should be lined up together so that we legally are very
Well,
clear
then we
what
can go ahead and
policies.
delete, add it to your deletion list. I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Right, but so that's what I'm hoping we can get as a consistent list instead of every time I'm working on policies, it's like, oh, wait, this matches, but I just happened upon it. I would like us to have a very clear and concise list instead of just a
I'll
guesswork
tell you,
list.
I did the best I could.
Okay.
I spent 2.5 hours on that, and so I
Well, no,
don't
and I
mean to
just,
get upset
I think
about
there
it, but
was
I
some
just-
misunderstanding. I
did the
thought
best
that's
I
what we were paying for, was to see, here's our policies. These ones will be replaced by this. These ones
But
just.
I don't know your policies intimately the way you all do. So I have to go by the titles and then, we can do more steps, but.
To some degree, we have to do the work of a board, and it is a lot of work. I agree with you, but it is our job to do that work. So if we're not experts on the policies yet, perhaps we need to become experts on our policies. I had a question specifically related to item 4. Inside item 4, it talks about students, parents, guardians, visitors, third parties may take them only if authorized in advance by the superintendent or his or her designee.
And that should really be superintendent or designee.
Yes, we need to drop the
And those were
pronouns.
In the previous.
Yeah.
But yeah. Drop all
But
the
my
pronouns.
concern with that is, I mean, the reality is there's been 20 different special programs, and every parent in the audience has taken multiple photos and videos of their child over the past many weeks.
Yep.
Or at athletic events or whatever else. And so my question is, where does the superintendent give that permission? Because the reality is, I probably could tell you 600 parents who would have violated this in the past week. And so practically speaking, what does that permission look like? What can it look like?
Well, typically it looks like the principal, but I know that's probably a hard one to do. So if you even want to delete that, I'm not opposed to that.
I would feel,
Well, my wife has violated it. When Todd's rushing across the finish line, she's recording. And she's
yeah.
hearing.
And so my feeling is perhaps we want to talk about eliminating that.
Yeah, 'cause the
I think.
procedure would be too hard.
I think the exception to that has been notable in the past is that sometimes in musical productions, we don't have the rights even to record those, and they specifically announce in advance that it may not be recorded
Right.
or photographed.
And that's the source of that.
Yeah.
Which actually is to prevent you from having
Right.
those issues.
But yeah, I would be a proponent of striking that section. And the other question that I have, I know that we some time ago did some policy work on recording on buses. And does this policy cover that when it says
Corporation property.
corporation property? Is that where that would fall inside? Okay. I just wanted to make sure. I know there were some disciplinary issues and some change in legislation a few years ago about that bus recording. Those are my only questions on this policy.
Okay, so where, Amy, would you please bring us a revised G350 for next month that includes an exception for public events in the school, maybe like sporting or plays or musical performances not otherwise subject to copyright may be recorded
So are you
for personal
on,
use.
Section 4, third paragraph.
third paragraph? Okay. So do you still want to keep then that section and have it say of non-public events? Does that address the concern? Where it says students, parents, or guardians, visitors, and third parties may take photographs, record audio, stream, or live stream non-public events, because all the others, because I think
Yeah.
you're gonna have the problem,
Yeah.
the same problem, anything that's a public event.
Yeah,
versus-
I think non-public events make
Okay.
sense. Like field trips are clearly non-public event. You
Right.
don't want them recording necessarily there, but a performance is,
Okay, so
Yeah.
I'll just put non-public events, because then anything public, that's where you're gonna have the problem.
right.
Okay.
And should we say public events may be recorded? Is that in there?
That is not there.
That is
I
not-
don't know if I would go that far,
wouldn't
because
go-
again, then if you did have a copyright issue,
Okay, then we've given
because that's
permission.
why we put, that's
Got
why
it.
we put it in there in the first place, was about copyright, so I would rather have it be silent,
Okay,
but put this non-public events.
okay, sounds good.
I can't do that right.
The next one on my list is.
I have a question. still on
Oh,
this.
sure.
So under the section where it talks about IEP meetings, it says parents are not allowed to record during a meeting unless they've gotten permission from the superintendent 3 days before the meeting. I'm not understanding why this is something that we need to have in place. And also the consequence. So to me, if I understand correctly, if I'm an employee or a student breaks this policy, there's clear disciplinary violation, consequences. But if a parent records it, we're saying you now are subject to a trespassing violation for doing a recording. So the two don't even seem to match up. And I'm not clear why parents aren't allowed to record a meeting so that they could go home and share it with their spouse or listen to it or something.
The reason why is because it ends up in FERPA violations, and many times that happens and the school isn't ready for that, and it ends up on the news or the social media, and that's a violation of the students, other students involved privacy rights. Now, the parents have the right to do that, but it's not a good, thinking about what's good for the student, that's not best for the student. So.
Wait, sorry,
and it's-
so if I'm a parent at an IEP meeting and I just want to record it, and if I
can.
haven't contacted, well, this says if I haven't contacted the superintendent 3 days earlier and asked his permission, I'm not allowed to. And if I do, then I now get trespassing violation. So I'm saying, I want to record it, and it's very clear that I can't go post it in places. It's, I mean, it's my, anyways, but I'm not clear why
The purpose
we
of the
are
3 days.
restricting that. Well, why are we even, so parents, I mean, my understanding, have you been contacted very often by parents who are asking for permission to record 3 days ahead of time an IEP meeting?
No, I haven't.
So I don't think it's being practiced.
But I don't think parents are recording meetings, are they? Because I wouldn't want to hold a meeting and think that we're recording a meeting. I would want to have a face-to-face trust.
Well, parents in Indiana legally can record a meeting unless we have this policy in place.
Well, and if the question is about why do we have the 3 days versus the no trespass is because that is the only thing legally that a school can do
Right,
to a parent. It's you can't
Right.
discipline, like you said.
right.
We just don't have any jurisdiction over parents. That's the only thing you can do. So anything in a policy about a parent violating it is going to say they would be no trespass because that's the only legal authority schools have over parents. As for the advance notice, that is really to help the school folks get ready and know, because that typically is a sign of, oh, there's some concerns, and that can prompt the school, not to try to get them to not record, they can still record, but to try to work through what are the potential concerns of why they think they need to record, and how can we help and make it collaborative versus being on the spot when you're getting ready to start the meeting. But the 3 days isn't magical, so if the board wanted to make that a different amount of time or not have it at all, you certainly could, but I'd recommend you have some kind of lead time so that your staff members have a chance to reach out, because that's also often a red flag that the parent has a concern they haven't shared. And that gives time to work through it before the meeting itself, and so that staff can be prepared for the meeting itself.
Yes, Rachel.
Well, I was just
I say, I do think that when a meeting is being recorded, it definitely raises the fuel level of it and can be contrary to having a really important, productive conversation about what's best for the student. So I find the 3 days to be helpful in helping the staff member and staff members who are going to be there kind of de-escalate their concern over that. If I think I'm going into a meeting and somebody pulls out a phone and says, I'm recording this now,
Yeah.
that has a totally different feeling than my husband is not able to attend. I would like to record it so he can see it. Would that be okay? That is just a totally different scenario.
Yep.
And it's just a respectful, professional thing to do for our teachers and staff members, is how I would interpret that.
Then to have time to make arrangements to have it recorded.
That's another
Our end too,
aspect, yeah.
because you can manipulate recordings.
Correct,
And
and
if
that
there's
has
distrust there,
Yeah.
that's up to a whole new level. And so I think it's important to be sure, one, everybody has the opportunity to really cross every T and dot every I, because we're talking mistrust now, probably, one. And two, I would definitely want both sides to be recorded.
Correct. Yeah, so it's like you said, an opportunity to try to work through it, to see what's going on, and to be prepared, and an opportunity to also be ready to record. So yeah, that's the purpose of it.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we'll do the first reading on G350 in the public meeting, and if anyone has any corrections or changes they'd like to see in that, please email them to Roberta and myself over the course of the next several weeks so that we can get that second reading and take care of that one in June. Yes.
When you announce this, would you please kind of make that question, invite families who might regularly participate in IEPs to review the language, and then kind
Okay.
of go the extra bit to invite people to comment upon this policy, review and comment while it's under first reading?
Yes, and if I forget, please remind me, because this
It
is
just
a
seems
while.
that might be a point of question here, and so that might be worth pointing out to our public.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Great, Tom? Yes, is there any public comment on the work session before we adjourn quickly? Nope, great. Okay, we're going to adjourn for 5 minutes, take a break, and we'll be back at 6. We are going to go ahead and get started, and I'm going to call to order the School Board of Trustees meeting. It's May 13th at 6:02 p.m. And it appears that everyone is real busy at school finishing up the year, so there are no special recognitions, and no one signed up for communication from the audience unless somebody snuck in on me. So we will move quickly to our consent agenda. Michelle shared with me that the annual lease for the church to use this building had no changes for 24-25, and that claims for the period of April 4th to May 3rd total $3,679,994, including regular corporation expenses and the Wabash Valley Education Center expenses. Of this amount, $2,413,710.48 were paid toward wages, salaries, and benefits. So I will hear a motion on the consent agenda. Moved by Mrs. Witt, seconded by Mr. Marley. Oh, and I forgot to mention, we have Yui here virtually from a meeting. So thank you for being here virtually. There are no comments on the consent agenda, so all in favor of passing it as written, please raise your hand. That's everybody. Mrs. Julian, thank you. And we will move on to unfinished business, which we do not have. We're cooking. Look at us go. New business. We have 2 board policies this evening that we discussed in our pregame, and 1 for a first reading. So I will entertain a motion about A300, please. Moved by Tom's, seconded by Brad. Comments? Rachel?
Yeah, I had one suggestion for you. I know that we just hopped through unfinished business, but it might help in future months if we move second reading of policies up to unfinished business. That might help clarify for people that process that we're doing. So I just wanted to throw that out there as an idea.
That is a good idea.
I don't have any comments on 300. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Lawrence?
For these 300, I have no problem with that, but I just wondering, I'm just hoping we can follow the procedures. So for first readings, and then next month we can leave that post online for next month's votings for the kind of second meetings. So
As we
that's all.
discussed
Yeah, I
in our work
understand.
session,
Yeah.
we only changed 6 words, and they didn't really change the substance of A300 as it was written. It was just a couple of clarifications and a URL. So I'm comfortable moving forward, and we have a motion and a second. So I think if there are no other comments, we should go ahead and vote. All in favor of approving A300 as amended, please raise your hand. That is everyone. Thank you. And next, we have A301. I will hear a motion
What are we doing?
to vote.
Second reading?
This is the second reading, yeah, we'll be voting on A301. Moved by Rachel, second by Brad. Is there any commentary about A301? Or anything that needs changed? Daisha?
Yes, I'm concerned. So when we left the meeting last month, we had discussed the decision of including details about K through 6 limitations of after school on the bus, at lunch, at recess. And when we left that meeting, the understanding was that we would get feedback from the principals on what's recommended, and then we'd come forward and talk about that. That happened just a few minutes ago. We've not ever discussed it till a few minutes ago. UA also recommended a change, adding study hall. So there's been various discussions on this, so I do not feel like A301 has been given a month of first reading. So I do not agree that we should be voting on this at this time, as information was just presented, not given the community a month to share input, is my input.
Rachel?
The policy A301 begins with generally no student may use a wireless communication device during instructional time pursuant to Indiana law. We just discussed this in our work session, but there are 4 exceptions to that. The first one is as specifically permitted by a teacher. And such permission may be given for each episode or as an ongoing grant of permission for regularly occurring use. So for this reason, the control is placed in the hands of the administrators and the instructors in the classroom. And then they have, as we're going to see later this evening, in their handbooks, given clear direction for their school buildings on what that might be. So while I appreciate Dr. Yin commenting about study halls, I think that was a very important point that our principals might be interested in giving that permission on an ongoing basis. Ultimately, that's at their discretion. So for those reasons, I'm comfortable voting on this tonight.
Daisha?
My understanding was that study hall isn't discretion, that it's considered instructional time. UA had just recommended it because it made it clear, not that the administrators or teachers get to choose, that it's the same thing. Is that what I understood from last month?
Yes, it's considered instructional time, but they can decide, they may
Teacher
have
could
different
say
rules
no,
for
but-
study hall. You know, because study hall is a different type of instructional time.
Okay.
In your handbook, maybe in study hall, we allow for these things,
Okay.
educational purposes.
Got it.
Versus in the classroom, it may be for these things, because study hall runs much differently than other classes.
Got it. Helpful.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Oh, I'm sorry, Yui, go ahead.
And the reason I put a study hall explicitly in the policy, I'm hoping to make it easier for teachers, whoever is supervising students in a study hall, to make it easier for him or her to, implement no cell phone use unless it's educational rule. And so, yeah, that's why I propose to add a study hall in it. But surely, students can use the cell phone, let's say, use the Duolingo to study foreign languages or some other educational purposes, then that will falling into the exceptions. But as a general rule, I hope we have that in the policy. So if students use cell phone to play video games or something like that, the teacher can say, hey, it's in the policy, you are not allowed to use the cell phone unless it's education purpose. I really feel it will make it easier for the teachers who supervise students in the study hall.
Okay, thank you for that. We have, oh, I'm echoing. Sorry. We have a motion and a second on the floor. So if there aren't any other comments, I think we should go ahead and vote on A301. All those in favor of approving it, please indicate with a raised hand. That is 5, Mr. Lawrence, Rachel, Tom, Brad, and myself. And all opposed? That is Daisha and Yui. Any? Oh, wait, are we voting? Do we vote online? Shoot. Do we vote when we're online, or do we?
You've got to do a roll call.
A roll call vote? Okay. Does raising your hand count, or do I have to actually say the name? Say the name? Okay. Got it. Okay. We'll do that next. Do you want to do a roll call for us, Tom? Would that be? Okay, go ahead.
Dr. Yin,
We're supposed to do a roll call vote on this, so we need to hear you say yes
no.
or no.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Marley,
Yes.
Witt,
Yes.
Mumford,
No.
Wong,
Yes.
and I'm a yes, so 5-2.
Great, thank you for that. So that one passed, and then next.
Should we go back to 300?
Yeah, we probably should. Let's go ahead and do a roll call vote on 300.
Yui, we're going to redo or do a roll call on 300. How's your vote on 300, A300?
Yui, we didn't know that we had to do a roll call vote because you're virtual. So we're going back to A300. And can you just repeat verbally your vote on A300, the last one we did?
Yes. on
Thank
that
you.
one.
Amy,
Yes.
Brad,
Yes.
Rachel,
Yes.
Daisha,
Yes.
Lawrence,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. 7-0.
Awesome. Thank you. No, you're good. I appreciate, sure, I appreciate it. Okay, so the next one, we just need a first reading of G350. Amy, if you'd like to share with us what that one's about, and
Yeah, G350
Yes.
is the audio, video, and digital recording. You did begun to discuss this, and so we will be submitting a change recommendation from what was originally sent that will discuss the aspect of making it clear that advanced authorization for recording in classrooms and other school property will only be needed for non-public events. In other words, public event recording is not required to have an advance authorization from the administration. So that is one change we made, but it's the circumstances, generally this policy is the circumstances under which individuals can record on school property or in school events.
Rachel, thank you.
Would you also make note of the gender neutral language
Yes.
change in there, please? Thank you.
Yes, and we're trying to get all of these cleaned up in general, but some of them have been, are buried deep in policies. So we'll try to, the ones, when we send you next batch, we'll try to send it so you don't have to make those corrections.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Daisha,
I had a question. During the work session, we talked about recordings at IEP meetings or meetings with parents, and that the policy is in place to give the corporation 3 days notice of recordings so that the presenters can be prepared and the school can possibly record. I'd like to understand, if I understand correctly, it says it's subject to approval and if they get approval. So my question is, why are we putting in policy that a superintendent or his or her designee gets to give approval or not approval for an audio recording? Why isn't it just they can do a recording,
Well,
but they give a
it's
3 days notice?
One aspect is, keep in mind, this isn't just IEP meetings in
Right,
that
you're-
section.
okay,
I
any
would
meeting,
say
yeah.
there isn't necessarily the same right to record, because there's not a right to record on school property generally. There can be a prohibition, so depending on what the meeting was, for example, if there were multiple families involved in the meeting, you may need approval. Even like a parent-teacher conference, you may say, just a gen ed parent-teacher conference, we're not gonna have recording at those because it stifles the conversation unless it's needed for an accommodation. That's always, if it's needed for a disability accommodation, that's always gonna happen. But if it's for a, trying to then later use it in a way that's not appropriate, that could be denied. So I think a key piece is it's not just, that isn't necessarily designed for IEP meetings.
So the point of this and your recommendation is that the superintendent or someone should be able to say to parents, like a parent-teacher conference, you're not allowed to record it.
Yeah,
We
I mean,
should
they
give
have the
them that
legal authority.
power.
They have the legal authority to do that
Because
generally.
it's on,
School property, yep.
they have the legal, like if we didn't pass this policy, they still can't do it?
Well, if you don't pass the policy, it's not clear what the procedure is gonna be. And you have kind of a void of direction of how your administrators are to handle that. Could they say no? Yes, but they wouldn't have as much of a basis to do so. Just like anything that's not written down, you want to get some aspects of procedures. And that's a pretty big picture one, so I'd have you put it in a policy as opposed to a handbook.
Got it.
thank you. Are there any other comments? Okay, that one has been first read officially, and we will revisit it next month. I'm gonna write that down. And then it was brought to my attention that there is another policy, A100, where we had revisions and corrections, and we did the second reading. I'm sorry, we did the first reading in April, and so we can do the second reading and go ahead and vote on that as corrected tonight, if we would care to have a motion to do so. Anyone? Thank you. Lawrence moved. Is there a second? Seconded by Rachel. Any discussion on the corrected A100, amended A100? No? Cool. Okay. All those in favor of roll calling, please be Tom.
Dr. Ian? A100?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Rachel?
Yes.
Daisha?
Yes.
Lawrence?
Yes.
And I'm a yes.
Super. That's everybody. Okay. We have moved through all of the policies that are ready as far as I can tell. Any other general policy issues to raise before I let Amy go? Okay. If you want to stay, I'd love to have you, but if you
I
want-
will go, but I am gonna send you your email with this revision that I've been making so that you'll have it and know that it's in your all's email when you're
Okay,
ready for
thank
it. And then
you.
I'll depart, but thank you. Always nice to see everyone and glad you made good progress.
Thank you. Oh, and one thing I did forget about G350 before we move all the way on was that it was recommended that I invite public comment. If anyone has opinions about that, it can be found in the board documents section of the website, and you can look at it for yourself. And if any parents or community members or staff or anyone else has suggestions, I would love to hear them. And you can email all of us now, which is handy. It's school board is that, how does it go? School board members at WLK12INUS. So, okay, so we will move on to our mental health update. Welcome. We're going to get you a microphone here, so just hold on.
Okay, good evening, board. My name is Allison Smith, and I'm your West Lafayette Community School Corporation District Mental Health Therapist. So I just want to give you a brief introduction to me. So like I said, my name is Allison Smith, and I was born and raised in West Lafayette, went to Klondike, graduated from Harrison, graduated from Purdue in 3 years with a Bachelor of Human Services, and in 2023, I graduated from the IU School of Social Work within a concentration of addictions and mental health. And after I graduated, I worked in community mental health in schools. And right before winter break, I started here at West Lafayette. And in February, I attained my LSW. So I sat for my licensing exam, and now I'm fully licensed as a social worker.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was a hard test. So I first wanted to highlight some of the district priorities that was sent out in an email back in December, because I feel as though my role goes into a lot of these priorities. And that priority is the priority of the whole child approach. And what does that mean? It means that we will support the well-being of students beyond academic needs. And there were several different strategies listed, but I highlighted two. The first being to invest in staff needs to support students who are at risk, and to identify quantifiable measures as a basis for analyzing student needs and setting goals for the position of diversity and mental health professionals in our schools. So when I first started in this role, I kind of sat down with Ms. Soros and Ms. Murtaugh, and we kind of said, let's create some objectives so that we know like what goals we're reaching. And I've listed these objectives up here. They're a little lengthy, but I have a social work background, and basically that means I want to eliminate barriers, get people resources that they need, and also to meet the needs of the growing mental health concern in K through 12. And that's a lot of what our objectives were here. So I wanted to first talk about the referrals for some services. Sorry, I'm really nervous.
We're really nice.
You're doing great. Take a breath.
Okay. Okay, I'm trying not to faint.
Don't flap your knees.
Okay, I'm really nervous. Sorry, guys. Grad school taught me how to do presentations, but not quite at this level. Oh, I'm gonna take a drink. Okay, so those referrals for services, when we look at our MTSS pyramid, really is coming from those tier 2 students. So whether those are behavioral, emotional, mental health concerns, concerns with home life, just students kind of needing some additional support. After that kind of initial watch out phase is made, school counselors will reach out to parents and they will send them a list that we have of therapists. And then once they make that initial contact and give them the criteria of being on a waiting list, then the referral is sent to me via Google form, and I'm able to make contact with parents within 24 hours. I try to do same day if possible. And in that email, I just like to say just about who I am and send consent forms and intake forms. After that, I'll schedule an intake with parents. That can be done over the phone, in person, preferably in person, just so I can meet parents, or virtually. And in that meeting, we just kind of discuss some concerns that we're seeing with the students and talk about goals that we'd like to meet together. And then after that, depending on the age of the student, I will contact the teacher, that's usually intermediate and elementary school, about an appropriate time of the day to meet with this child. And depending on the age, depends on the amount of time I meet with each kid. So strategy number 3 was talking about data and analyzing the data. What am I doing? What are my numbers? So the measures that I'm tracking, first of all, being attendance, right? How many days have we missed? And Skyward has this cool little feature where it'll show you how many days for the whole school year a student's been present. So the cool thing about that I thought was important for attendance is because mental health can affect really any of these things. It can be a big underlying concern, right? Is our anxiety so bad we can't get out of bed? Or is our attendance poor because we're being shuffled between mom's house and grandparents' house? Number of grades below a C, I just kind of put a C. There's no rhyme or reason behind that. Just like that area where we're kind of watching to make sure you're not slipping between the cracks in some of your grades. Number of missing assignments. This also kind of goes with attendance, right? Are we just kind of forgetting assignments? Are we confused on how to complete assignments, or did we leave them at home? Number of discipline referrals, and are these referrals just for tardies and frequent lateness, or is it really extreme outbursts or elopement from classrooms? Like, what's going on at school? And I also just have like a small little checkbox about a special population, which BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color, LGBTQIA+ students, families or students that come from a lower socioeconomic status, lower income family, and or students who might be on a special education category, or students on a 504 plan. And another category is those students on safety plans. And those can be safety plans where there may be a risk to themselves, or maybe risks, like I said, for like elopement, that sort of thing. So specific referral data. So since right before winter break, I have in total received 48 referrals. Elementary school, 12, intermediate school, 16, junior, senior high school is 22. And at my current standing, I have a utilization rate of 100%. So every single parent that I have made contact with has utilized services. Right now, as it stands, currently 8 of my 48 students have transitioned to seeing their outside therapist. And what that means is that 40 of those kids are still sitting on waiting lists in the community. So even more specific, some therapy hours data, and this was as of April 26th when we had a built-in snow day, because this takes a lot of math. I have provided almost 245 hours of direct individual therapy to students in the West Lafayette School District. And I've broken down the hours, and there's a bit of a stratification there because I spend Mondays at the elementary school, Tuesdays and Wednesdays at the intermediate school, and Thursdays and Fridays at the junior senior high school. So that's why there's a bit of a differentiation in some of those numbers. I also do some group therapy at the elementary school. I ran a 3rd grade anxiety group, and I'm currently running a 3rd grade grief group. Similarly, there was a day where I helped with the facilitation and instruction of the elementary school-wide Kindness Day project, which was me kind of running these instructions, and it aligned with the Indiana counseling competencies. So to get into the specific need for this position, this is a little bit more of that data, not specifically just mine, but just in general. And some of the resources that I found, this top one just talks about how this applied for psychiatrists, therapists, case managers, that they had no new openings for patients, and average wait times were 3 months or longer, and 40% of those said their wait list had grown in the past year. And below that, the CDC said 1 in 5 children have an emotional, mental, or behavioral disorder, and then only about 20% of those children will receive mental health services. And I also wanted to put this graphic up here because it talks about the top 10 contributors to burden of disease of children. When we just look at the piece of this pie, there's a glaringly obvious piece, and that top one is mental disorders, which does include self-harm. So to continue with some of that bigger, higher level data, I did feel like it was important to talk about high school student suicide ideation. We can't talk about mental health without talking about mental health crises. And this was data from 2021, and all of these percentages, whether that was considering, planning, or actually made attempts, have all increased significantly in just the past decade. So to kind of highlight some specific needs of kiddos that I've worked with here at West Lafayette, the bigger two that I really see being anxiety and those major depression. However, there have been several students that have presented with ADHD or kind of classroom behavioral concerns, even folks that might not necessarily meet a mental health diagnosis, but maybe struggle a little bit socially with making friends, or maybe we are just kind of responding to a loss in the family, or you name it, divorce of parents, etc. So this is not an exhaustive list, but kind of those bigger ticket items that I've worked with students here at school with. And just since this was kind of a grant position and we're talking about really implementing this into the West Lafayette kind of world, I thought I would throw some future ideas out there because I'm very passionate about mental health and I'm passionate about working at the school for mental health. And I feel as though some of that comes with these future ideas. And since I started right before winter break, doing this for a whole year could really allow for an increased caseload. I have 48 now, but as we kind of transition some of those students onto the wait lists and getting into permanent therapists, that's when I have spots open up. And I don't necessarily say no or turn away from students because we can always switch down to every other week. There's things we can do. But to support mental health initiatives within the schools, I've worked at a couple different schools just in grad school and out of grad school, and West Lafayette is by far one of the warmest cultures for mental health. I've not quite seen a school like West Lafayette about mental health. And so that approach is really important, and I think continuing that would be really helpful. And continued development of procedures. There's just things we've kind of learned along the way that we think would be helpful, and that would be multiple languages for intake forms. We have several nationalities in West Lafayette, and I think representing that, I'm all about eliminating the barriers. So how can we do that in several ways? And then development and forms for procedures of student progress meetings. We kind of decided that I wasn't going to go to every single student meeting that I had because that would be a lot of meetings in my priorities meeting with students. So recently we've kind of been developing some strategies for me to provide my input without actually being at the meetings. Growth of community partnerships. There was a really cool talk that the high school did on their professional development day from the health department, and it was about the handle with care notices that we get. And not only was it about that, but it was also about learning about childhood trauma, being a trauma-informed school and what that looks like. And I feel as though there's those really good ties there, other people in the community who are also concerned with mental health. And then ongoing clinical analysis of data collected, which is exactly what this presentation is. So to circle back, I wanted to bring us all back to the district priorities alignment and kind of refocus on how what I've been doing here with this role has been really about the whole child approach. We look at a student and we see them as a holistic person. They are what they bring in outside of the classroom. They are the student in the classroom. And just the phrase of supporting students' well-being beyond academic needs is exactly what this position embodies. So investing in staff to support students who are at risk, like we discussed in this presentation, and working on continuing to develop these quantifiable measures and continuing to find ways that work. And yeah. And I want to thank you all for listening.
Very nice
I am
stuff. Thank you.
less nervous now, so thank you. And I want to open the floor to any questions. Yeah.
Rachel.
Thank you for your passion. Take a drink. Yeah, you did a great job. Thank you for your passion for mental health and for our students. I think it is a really unique place, and I love that you have kind of blended facts with also your impressions. So thank you for that.
Thank
My question is about these 40 students. First of all, thank you. That's a lot of time with kids, and I know is appreciated and needed. Those 40 students who are not placed with an external therapist are about to go on a 3-month break in a less structured environment with families or situations that might be the source of their difficulty at times. So what are your thoughts on what re-entry would look like for them in the fall? What, what are your thoughts? How are you going to end the year with them?
Yeah, great question. So right now, the requirement for seeing me at the school is that students are on a wait list in the community somewhere, whether that's multiple, whether that's one. So the idea is that students are able to transition to seeing their outside therapist, even if it is starting in June, July, August. And that's kind of looked like in the past about month or so, it's been consistent outreach with parents. Hey, where are you at? What support do you need? Do you need an extra list? Were you able to get in? Were you turned away? Kind of working through any of those issues and getting kind of creative with solutions, because we've had folks that said, hey, we're traveling all summer, we won't be here. So kind of working on where can we get you in virtually, what will meet your needs. And then as far as re-entry, we've kind of left that open because a lot of these students are on waiting lists that they could get in next week, or some of them might not get in until August. And if that's the case, they'll be kind of right back in. The idea is that when we kind of work up that MTSS pyramid, when you're meeting with me, you're kind of at the top of the pyramid because we're really giving you the most support necessary. And then kind of once you get that support and we get going, the idea is that we'd kind of help drop you down to maybe the tier 2. And if those concerns are still present and still really necessary to meet with me, then we would be open to restarting with those kids in the fall.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyone else? Brad.
How much help do you have in meeting with these students? I mean, is it just you? Are you meeting with all 40?
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
1,200 minutes. I did the math.
Well, I know. That's what I was doing too. Don't be shy about asking for help or resources.
I have the most amazing team. I have to say, my counselors are my girls, so
Yeah.
they are quite the team, and principals, obviously.
Okay.
But the flexibility that I have in this role is actually much different than any other position that I've worked in. This school is so supportive, and I remember the first week I went home crying because I was so thankful for this school and this job. So I appreciate you saying that, though.
You better appreciate you.
We appreciate you.
Thank
And
you.
all of our counseling staff is amazing. I don't get the opportunity to tell you publicly as often as I should that I think the world of all of you. And so I appreciate your work.
I just kind of want to echo what Allison said with regard to the warm culture that one feels coming in new. Allison, when the position was being created, it was right at the time where I was coming in, and our counselors all worked together at a round table or at a square table, but all together with Steve talking about developing what that was going to look like.
Yeah.
And they've been in it all the way through, and
Oh, yeah.
team effort is clear. And our principals were right there too. So that I found it most impressive.
This
I would
position's
agree with
really
you.
unique, and I think that's fantastic. There's nothing, not that there's nothing quite like this, but I'm thankful for it, and I know that the students I meet with are thankful for it. I get lots of questions. Are you coming back in the fall? Are you at the intermediate school? Are we going to see you there? So
Speaking to that, what Allison is suggesting, we will be presenting to you, the board, a staffing plan with some of these positions next month. And you can see she's provided quite solid data for us to consider.
Thank you very much for. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rachel.
Benefit sorry, I'm just ignorant on this, so I'm gonna ask you a question I'm ignorant on. What does continuing education look like for you professionally now that you've kind of accomplished that? What is that? What would that burden be, as we consider a staffing plan? What would be your need?
Yeah. So kind of the next step, because right now I'm a fully licensed social worker. I know there's a couple other social workers in the room, but the next step for me would be my licensed clinical social worker, which would be my LCSW. And that requires 2 years of supervision. And typically with folks, unless you're at like a community mental health agency, that's something I would seek outside of this role. So something that I would get from an outside provider, and that's just clinical supervision for about 2 years, and then I would sit for that exam, and then I'd be a licensed clinical social worker. And all that means is that I get to bill private insurance if I was in a private practice world. That's kind of what I have next. Other than that, I don't know. Okay. We'll see.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Alice.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
May I ask?
Oh, I'm sorry, Yui, did you have a question? I didn't see your hand.
May I?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you very much for your work. And I have a question about the high school one. And so there's, maybe I missed it, but I wonder how the referral works for different schools. Then for WDs and WLS, was students students referred by their homeschool teachers? For high school, then who will refer students to you if there's any problem? Because sounds to me the number is kind of low compared with the Indiana statistics. So yeah, given that we have many students in high school, and if we only count on counselors, we don't have that many counselors. So I wonder in general how it works. And then that's my first question. The second is it possible to survey our students in general regarding their mental health status, especially the high school students, and to figure out, what might be the reasons for them to have any problems, and what the schools and the families can do to help them. And as a general evaluation. And another thing is I really appreciate that you focus on different subgroups, and that's very helpful. But one group, and I didn't find there, which might also be our target group, are some of those high achievers. As far as I know, some students are quite stressed out because of the heavy course load and the high expectation on them. And so this is quite unique for our district. So I wonder whether we can also do something there. And because I heard, some students not feeling well sometimes after the exam or something. And I'm not in school, so I only heard from kids. So I wonder whether that might be a problem. And surely there might be some other subgroups as well. That's why I propose to have some more general evaluation to see where, the problems might be and what we can do to help students in mental health.
So I guess to first address your second question, as far as the student surveys, a really wise principal once told me that to conduct a student survey, I'd have to get parent permission first if they're under 18, which that is absolutely something we could do. Like, I would love to build that in the future, just kind of talking about moods or what have you learned, and usually it's a pretty informal reflection, and it can be something as simple as, hey, what'd you think about that skill we worked on last week? Or tell me a way that you tried this coping skill, or what settled with you after last week, or what did you take home from that? So I guess is more of a formative evaluation. Surveys are something we could absolutely do. It would just require maybe that step of a parental permission and getting that all made sure it's good to go. Your first question, could you remind me of what it was again, please?
Referral. How are
yes.
they referred?
Okay. Specifically high school referrals?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Typically high school referrals are when kiddos are coming down to their counselors. Because all of my referrals come from only counselors, not teachers, just so that there's like a pretty streamlined of communication. And that could be parents contacting school counselors with concerns, but I feel as though most often it's students coming down saying, hey, there's something going on, or teachers are communicating to counselors saying, I'm concerned about this student, I'm noticing something, or they're falling behind in my class, or they're doing really well in my class, they have straight A's, but they're really anxious, they're really stressed out. That's kind of usually, and it's pretty similar for the intermediate and elementary school as well, is kind of those concerns from parents, mostly teachers and counselors is where we're seeing those. And usually at the high school level, it's the high schoolers coming down to counselors that I notice. Did that answer your
Thank you.
question?
Sounds like it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Of course.
All righty.
Thanks, Allison.
Cool.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, next up, we have our principals talking with us about handbooks.
Okay, I have asked if I could go first, just because I have some little third graders visiting our school today that I'd like to get back to. So I apologize for jumping ahead of Sarah here in order. Our handbook has minimum amount of changes. We did have, as a corporation, discussion about the attendance policy, K-12, and attendance right now has a lot of direction needed from the DOE, so we're on pause with that and have indicated in our handbooks the link where we will be adding the link to where parents can find the most current information about attendance, and when that is updated in the summer, we will add that in there. That's the biggest change that we went through. We had a couple minor changes. Our arrival for bus students was 7:25 this year, and we are able to get our students in at 7:30, thanks to Doug working really hard to make that happen. And so we are moving to 7:30, which is the time that our teachers are starting their day, so it aligns much nicer now. We also have added the grading policy. That was a suggestion by a parent, and I thought it was the grading scale. We didn't have that in our handbooks, but we did have it on our report cards, and the parent asked if we can add that somewhere that is visible. So I thought that was a great thing to put in there as well. For sixth grade, as they try to prepare for students heading into the junior high, they did have one tweak that they did with homework policy, and that is after 2 weeks, the students will receive a 0, and that's to be able to bring some closure after 2 weeks of trying to get that assignment in. We also want to make sure that parents who are calling or trying to email, the teacher at the last minute recognize that the teacher may not have time to check something for a dismissal change. So we ask that they call the office, and that's another change that we've added into our handbooks. Some other little things were more clarification purposes, like instead of a certified teacher, it says a staff member regarding Quest, which is our after-school homework support that we have for our students. Physical education, we ask that they have tennis shoes on, and it's for safety purposes, so that's been clarified as well. We do also ask that parents or guardians that are coming to our school have a proof of identification as they come in, and we have that on our door so parents know as they're coming in that that's going to be asked of them, and we've been really consistent with doing that, so we wanted to put that also in our handbook for families to know. And then the last thing that we have made as far as the change is the drop-off and pickup procedures, just adding that staff are out there to support and help, and that's always been happening, but we didn't have that in our plans. So we added that piece. Those are all the changes that we have made for our handbooks for this coming fall.
Okay, thank
Yes.
you. Rachel? Yes, we do need a motion. Are we gonna, yeah, I think we need to move and then second, and then discuss, and then we'll do the same for little s. So I will take a motion. It's moved by Rachel, second by Brad. Okay, now we can discuss. Thank you.
So this is just me being curious. It's been a while since I've had a student in intermediate school. I noticed in the elementary, it lays very clear parameters on when the playground and outdoor space around the elementary school can be used and when it cannot be. I don't know if that exists in yours, and I'm just curious about it. And have you had difficulty with students in that gated-in area, or has it been no big thing?
It hasn't been a problem, so we haven't done anything to put parameters on that. Our after-school care program is much smaller than what they have at Sarah's building. So it really, truly hasn't been a problem. And we've communicated with them, and they haven't had any issues with a few people in the public coming over and shooting hoops while our kids are playing in the Safe Harbor program. So it's been nice to be able to let kids be able to use our playground after hours. We do ask them to go home first. So if we see backpacks, we're like, you didn't go home first, because we want to make sure that they've checked in with their parent. And so we do ask that they do that before they come back. But a lot of area kids will come back with their bikes and play on the playground for a little bit before heading home again.
Great.
Thanks.
Daisha?
I had noticed that at the elementary school, there's parent-teacher conferences are required, but at the intermediate school, it's not. And my understanding it's because of being a Title I school engagement strategy. Does that mean Willis is not, or it's just there's different ways to approach it, or how is this?
So
Why do we do one or the other?
we have several teachers that will do parent-teacher conferences. For our teachers, a lot of them are also communicating very regularly through Skyward with grades, and so parents are seeing immediately what is there. They are able to have conferences, and many will request that, and teachers are willing to do that. We do not have like scheduled specific dates for it because it hasn't been on the calendar for them to have that. If we're looking at the next year, I think it was that those days are built in, if I remember right, that time, not those days. We do have teachers that are excited to be able to do that, but it has not been at this time allocated as far as hours to be able to do those. So many of our teachers have been doing those after hours on their own, and just working with parents on convenience of when their schedules align.
Helpful. And then I don't know how this works out and who makes the call. It seems like at the end of the elementary handbook, there's the K-12 student code of conduct. Does that go at the end of both of them? Is it just at one of them? Because there's some questions on the code of conduct, and I didn't even know, because it's K through 12, who does that and how that works.
So we didn't change anything with our code of conduct, but our code of conduct is the same. The difference is formatting. So we use a lot of little diamonds because that's what we have in our little font and numbers. But if you look at the actual wording and compare, you'll see that they are aligned. So it is the same language, and that code of conduct comes, I believe isn't it Indiana? Is it the school board?
The school board policy.
It's
Pulled from the code.
Because that's exactly where, yes,
Yep.
Indiana code,
Yep.
that's what I was trying to think. So all of that is directly from there, but it is the same language. It just doesn't look the same as far as format, but it is the same language in
It's
there.
the same language. So then my question is, we're redoing policies, and currently we have policies in place that contradict what it says in the handbook. So I didn't know how that even, and I don't even know if that's a you call. Like I didn't know from a legal point of view how this is being handled. And so I guess, like I said, it's more of a handbook question before voting than necessarily a you problem, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
So there's a place at the beginning of the code of conduct that actually addresses that. I'm trying to find exactly where that's located, but it basically covers the fact that if any policy changes, that supersedes anything that we have in our handbooks.
Okay, so like the bullying one, I know is one that we haven't gotten to, but it's been lots of discussion that may change that. So then that would do it. The other one, though, that is a question is currently we have that parents have the right to appeal in the handbook, yet our current policy does not give parents the right to appeal suspensions and expulsions. So it actually, the handbook goes against what our current policy does. And like I said, this is not meant to be, this is a you problem.
This
This
would
is
have
more
been
of
a
a question.
helpful question to receive ahead of time.
I
so
did,
we
I
could.
sent it out last week.
I'm sorry, I missed that one.
Yeah, I sent this out asking about it.
Okay. I believe the Indiana code dictates what it's called the Uniform Code of Student Conduct. And so if it's Indiana law, we follow that.
So currently we have a policy which I'd asked to prioritize, we just haven't gotten to it yet. Our policy 5610, the previous school board members decided that parents are not allowed to appeal expulsions or suspensions. And that was a local decision. Yet our handbook says, what I think it should be, that parents are allowed to appeal to the school board. So what I'm saying is our handbook contradicts our current policy.
What's the current policy that you're citing?
5610. So sorry, like I said, as I sent this to last week, because I was like, I don't know about the motion. This isn't meant to be a,
I would rather talk about it now before it's a real issue.
Can you give me the paragraph where it says that parents aren't allowed to appeal that?
uh-huh. I can pull this for you. The policy one?
Yes.
Yes.
The school board will not hear appeals of administrative decisions related to
Yeah,
expulsion.
they can be appealed, but the school board is not the determining factor,
Right.
as I understand it. But let me read it again.
I would suggest that's probably the case. Because that's the choice you can make, but I gotta pull it up myself.
Sorry, say that one more time. I didn't hear.
The board may or may not hear them. And so
Yeah, the board will not hear appeals.
I suspect it's saying the board won't hear them. It doesn't mean you can't appeal it. You just don't, the board doesn't.
The
take this.
board doesn't hear the appeal, so they have a right to it, but they can appeal. That's not taking away their right to appeal. It just means that the board will not adjudicate it.
Right, so in our handbook, so first our policy says the board will not hear appeals of administrative decisions related to suspension and expulsion. So that's our current policy. And then the handbook currently says, sorry, the student or parent has the right to appeal an expulsion or decision to the school board within 10 days. So those are exact. So here it's saying that parents may not appeal, and we've actually had this come up since I've been on the board where we were told parents are not allowed to appeal this.
Yeah, that's a contradiction. You're exactly right.
So I didn't know how we're supposed to.
So that needs to be, in order to be consistent with policy, that needs to be addressed in the handbook.
Okay.
I don't think we're allowed to change the Indiana Universal Student Code of Conduct though, right?
Right.
So,
I think this would be Amy Matthews'
We
question.
would,
yeah.
yes.
we'll need
As
to
legal
ask.
counsel.
But I do know that when we're setting policy, I know why you selected what you select. I wasn't here for that one.
Right.
But it's because Neola gives you the opportunity to select one over the other.
Correct.
Yeah.
And in my recall, this has been a while ago, but my recall is the reason that decision was made is that we felt the superintendent and the administrative team would be the better judge of the situation for the student than a board who are not trained educators. So that's my recall.
I'm trying to find where you sent this, Stacia. Can you help me with the
date of the email I sent.
or
out?
the subject line?
Yeah, I think it's Monday questions. Sorry.
Okay. The one with 13 questions there. The handbooks, code of conduct.
Yeah, because we both,
Bullying.
it's the exact same language.
Okay. Okay, so.
You found it?
Yeah, I do. Let me make a note, please. Okay, I will send that to Amy Matthews to review.
Can I add one more thing in case you're wondering? I know you haven't asked this question, but just to tell you about our handbook process of what we did do. On August 8th, our teachers were given the opportunity to sign up for multiple committees that they would like to serve on in our school. And for the handbook committee, we always want representatives from each grade level, a specials area teacher, and a small group teacher, meaning someone from either intervention or special ed or EL. Then on March 20th, the student handbook was shared with the 5 teacher representatives for those areas to get feedback from their teams and discuss what changes they felt needed to be looked at. They worked with their teams to gather suggestions, recommendations, and then brought those back to the handbook committee. On the 28th of March, they came back together as a committee to discuss the team's recommendations and collaborated to come up with consensus regarding changes. The student handbook then made those updates, and on April 22nd, the parent council gave some recommended parents that would be willing to serve on the handbook committee to be able to review. Mrs. Quaglio met with the parents on April 25th to review the recommendations. The parents provided their feedback during that meeting. And on April 26th, Mrs. Quaglio also met with students from various grade levels in our building to discuss the student handbook and the recommended changes. And after all of that feedback was there, they made a final version that was sent then to Mrs. Julian on April 29th for your review. So I wanted to give you that as well today.
Thank you. I figured out the problem. Dr. Greiner said he would look into that in Friday notes on your email, and I only got access to the Friday notes today. So that's why it slipped my mind, and I'm sorry. I've made a note to talk to Amy Matthews. Because your handbook is consistent with the Indiana code that we're not going to change, I think it would be reasonable to go ahead and vote on the handbook so you can get them printed.
And just to clarify, school boards actually get to choose which way they follow. Indiana code doesn't dictate, is my understanding, what the handbook says. I wish it did, but.
I believe you're right, Mrs. Mumford, because that was my point that I was trying to make, that I know we've had that choice, and I know that Neil.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Mrs. Matthews would tell us the same thing, but
So I'm just saying it's not as straightforward as, like I said, I wish it was. I'd like to go that route, but.
How do we help you get these printed?
That was my earlier suggestion.
Yeah.
Because policy would supersede anything that would be in the handbook anyway, so as long as it's a matter of deciding policy, the handbook is.
Okay, that makes sense. So,
So that would be where it says the right to appeal, that whole section is what you're
Well,
saying.
that's doesn't
Yeah.
line up right now.
Right. I'm just making sure.
I'm gonna send you an email. So to strike the right to appeals.
So the entire section is going to go away, is that correct? Is that what we're saying?
It would be,
Just want to make sure we have the right thing go to print.
It's just in entirety, it says the student or parent has the right to appeal an expulsion decision to the school board within 10 days of the receipt of notice of the action taken. The student or parent appeal to the school board must be in writing. If an appeal is properly made, the board will consider the appeal unless it votes not to hear the appeal.
Yes, that would be what you
The
was trying.
whole thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think you
Could
could
you-
leave a student has, or a parent has a right to appeal.
Yes.
Within 10 days.
Yeah.
Period. And then the,
Policy will
dictate
where that goes.
in right, and I would maintain in writing as well, just for clarity's purpose.
Yeah, I wouldn't strike it entirely because it's an important piece of information about the right to appeal and the ability to appeal.
I think that makes sense.
I've sent you a brief, poorly formatted email about that so that everybody's on the same page.
If you want, go ahead and read how it will read after you strike what you're saying.
So it would be the student or parent has the right to appeal an expulsion decision within 10 days of the receipt of notice of the action taken. The student or parent appeal must be in writing. If an appeal is properly made, It says the board will consider the appeal, so
I
we
would
would
just-
need to.
Right there.
Yeah,
Okay.
So before that point.
And
Mix
just so
all this.
everyone is aware, when you send the information as an expulsion examiner about your final decision, you include language specifically about the right to appeal. And so parents would not have to rely on the handbook to understand what their next step would be if they wish to appeal the final decision.
And those forms are actually given to us by the Department of Education. I mean, yes, we can
They're
alter them.
recommended by
But
ISBA.
yes, but we can, we do have something to use as a template, which helps.
Okay. So can we vote on the handbook as amended to approve it? Does that work for everybody? Okay. There aren't any other comments. Tom, do you want to call the roll on that?
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Brad,
Yes.
Rachel,
Yes.
Daisha,
Yes.
Lawrence? Yes.
Great.
7-0.
Great. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm heading back to my third graders. Yes.
They're mine. They're mine. Only for 7 days, and then they can be yours. Okay, well, that cleaned up a lot of the discussion, so I'm glad you shared that, thank you. So we just made some very minor tweaks. Kind of how I work through this process is I start the draft of the next year's, like basically from day one of school. So as things come up or discussions are had, we jot down notes and then we kind of verify back with teachers, like, is this something we need to look at? This year, we just made a couple clarifications as far as when students may be in the building after school. And that was a parent requesting some clarification. And then just some clarification as far as from our nurses, when students can return to school after having the antibiotic. So those were our big portions. And also thank you. I know when you were doing the review, you checked some links for us, so appreciate that. And those were all cleaned up. So
Thank you.
that is the bulk of ours.
Okay, I need a motion on that one, and let's go ahead and motion to approve it with the same change as previously.
So moved.
Moved by Tom, seconded by Rachel. Okay. Any discussion on Will S.'s handbook? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and do the roll call vote. Oh, sorry. Go
May
ahead.
I ask a question?
Yeah, you've got a delay, so you're still sitting the way you were a minute ago. So sorry about that. Go ahead.
So for the WLS handbook, and so I have a general question. So I wonder who are the audience of this handbook? Because sounds to me some of the rules are for students, some of the rules are for parents, kind of, because even how the person are dressed, or your children, or sometimes, and your child. And so, yeah, I just, I'm little, also some of the rules sounds like for staff members. And so I'm a little bit confused. I'm not sure exactly the handbook, who the handbook is for, the audience of the handbook. Another tiny thing I noticed that is, I think at one of the policy discussion, we talk about that issue and about the recording of the event. And one rule says parents cannot record other kids, but it sounds to me it's quite common that people take pictures of the whole show, including everybody on the stage. And will that be okay, or it's forbidden from now on?
So I'll start with first the question about who this is written for. Since our students are kindergarten through 8 years old, it's really written for parents. Our students are not accessing our student handbook. It's really a guide to help parents help their children. And if there were specific sections that I can clarify, I'm happy to do that. But yeah, it's really meant for parents to help them understand how to navigate life, since sometimes we're the first ones that get to encounter them for education.
Okay. So then do we need a different title for it? Because the content is called a student code of conduct. And yeah, I feel some of the content doesn't look like so. So yeah, but it's not a big deal, but I just feel, yeah, when I read the title and the content, I feel, oh, that's for parents. And so, yeah.
Okay, we'll give that some consideration next year, I think, because we need to get these printed. How about that? Okay. Rachel?
Sure, I just had a quick question. I noticed you had an extra paragraph on page 3 related to sexual harassment and bullying. But then on page 18, you have the more detailed description of bullying. And so I just wondered what was leading you to that question or that statement on page 3? Because they appear to be kind of redundant in the same policy, so I figure you must have a reason.
Most of it is, a lot of times we find parents will read one section or the other. Not
Okay.
both. Because I think once you get into the student code of conduct, the very legal pieces, sometimes people tend to skim over it and miss those highlights. But looking in the alphabetical order of the rest of it, it does.
Okay.
That's what we found.
It was a little short bullet point
Yeah.
for them to get the gist, and then
Would it be helpful if we even mentioned like see page 18 for
I think
further?
that might be a good thing for more detail.
Yep.
Because this does seem to be very quick.
Concise.
Yeah.
For a big thing.
Yeah.
Yep, I can do that right now.
Thank you.
Great. Anything else? Yui, are you good? Okay, we'll assume that's a yes. All right, Tom, would you go?
Yeah,
Oh,
sorry, Amy.
Yeah, sorry, there's
My
a-
other question is about the privacy. Attending a school event, picture may not be taken of other children, and that must, yeah. So yeah, I wonder whether that'll be the rule for the future. And let's say a group of kids are dancing together, parents will take a picture of that performance. Will that be allowed at all, or in the future, or just for clarification? So because it seems to me it's quite common that parents do take pictures of the whole show, including their own children and others, when all the kids are dancing, singing together.
I think it's at the after-school events, when it is the public, that kind of is covered in our corporation policy, or the policies you guys are working on now. It's when we have, I'm sorry, I think she's still.
No, it's delayed.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, the audio's in
Yeah,
real
what she's
time.
saying.
Yeah.
Okay, so if it's during the school day, we feel that it's kind of within our control and within our duty to help protect some of the families who have privacy requests. They've got media denials. And so that's the part that we're really working on, is during the day events and during the day activities, where we ask them to really focus on their child, or to even have a picture that a teacher has taken, because the teacher is able to see who has those media denials. But those after school public events, those are the ones, like the musicals and those types of things. Those are the ones where that's where kind of the school board policy is covering us, and just really asking people to use their best judgment, that if they have their own personal child with a safety concern, that maybe they ask to opt out of that, but just understanding that it's a public event at that point.
Does that answer your question?
So it's okay for parents to take pictures of the public events.
Right.
Correct.
Okay, yeah, just to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Great. Tom, would you go ahead and call the roll?
Yui,
We're voting to approve with the changes.
Yui,
Yui, are you able to hear me? I think you're muted. Okay, how about we let you abstain? Because
Yui, if you can hear us, if you can unmute your computer.
oh, she sent me a text that says yes, but I don't think that counts. I think we need to actually hear you. for legal purposes. Can you unmute? Okay. Well, since there's no controversy, let's just call that an abstention due to technology, and we'll move on.
Amy,
Yes.
Brad,
Yes.
Rachel,
Yes.
Daisha,
Yes.
Lawrence,
Yes.
I'm a yes. So
Okay, that's,
601 officially.
yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mrs.
Thank you.
Lynn.
Okay, wonderful. Sorry about the technical difficulties there. Can you can hear us all right? Just nod. Or here, can you hear us? And she says ... Yes, she can hear us. Okay, would you like to call Sean's phone and we can put you on speaker and that way you can do the other votes? Yeah, Brandon says you're still muted on your side. Or maybe your microphone broke right in the middle of the meeting because timing is everything. Yeah, go ahead and call her. Call her.
Okay, finally, yes.
Hey, there you
Sorry.
are. Great. Sorry about that. Okay,
Sure. Yes.
You're fine.
Somehow
you're fine.
It's just now there was a glitch.
Yeah,
Yeah, I voted yes to this policy.
you vote yes. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. Now we're going to move on to strategic planning and Dr. Greiner.
This is just information, as you are aware. You have in the packet a document of potential vendors to facilitate our strategic planning. We've shared with you our top choices in Friday notes. The next step is for the board to determine how you want to move forward in the selection process. You may determine that our team will move forward with a recommendation to you to vote, or you as a board may decide to interview select vendors and then make a decision. And if you decide you want to do that, we can assist in getting that lined up for you. Or you as our team is willing to work alongside you if there are certain vendors that you would like to meet with in conjunction with us meeting with you and work together. We are comfortable with any of those three choices because for us, we just want the board comfortable with a vendor that makes it a smooth process and an opportunity for us to work together with the community to develop effective strategic planning that leads to a successful outcome of what we hope to accomplish through that process. So, as you know, our proposed timeline is to begin strategic planning either in August or September of this coming year. And we would encourage the board to discuss next steps yet this evening. And then from there, our goal or hope is that the board will make this an action item for June.
Since it's information only, we can simply discuss. So does anyone have a strong personal feeling about how we should select our strategic planning vendor?
May I ask,
Yes, go ahead.
I wonder whether, can I see? Okay, I wonder whether we can get more information for different plans, because right now it's fairly brief. And it will be helpful to see the specific, what the service will include. And if they have done something similar elsewhere, can they bring their sample work? So for us to evaluate which one might be a better fit for us.
That is absolutely possible, Dr. Yen. And each vendor has shared that they would love the opportunity to meet with the board to answer specific questions. So that is most certainly a possibility.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep, okay, you're delayed. Great, Daisha.
I have a question. In general, so we're looking at average cost ranging from $6,000 to $172,000. So in general, just without meeting with them, what is the different kind of products that they're offering through each of these?
We didn't see a whole lot of a different product. And so when numbers came in, that impacted choices. So one of them, you heard that when we met with them, we were very comfortable with them lead us through the process. When we saw that cost, that became a whole different story for our team.
past, I believe, did not include survey measures or
Okay.
focus groups with people outside of the board and district leadership. The ones that were in the more general range and everything above that included surveys for the community or for staff, focus groups involving those outside of the board and district leadership and going out to the community. So that was one difference with that lowest priced one.
Just
where
the
it
one, though.
was- Yeah,
Do you have a top three you could select?
We had a top
Right
three.
now?
Yes, but one of the top three came in really high, and so we actually have a top two.
I'd be comfortable with meeting with those two, not all of them, if you have a definite.
Would that be all right with everyone else to, yeah, Rachel?
I would be very interested in seeing a side-by-side in advance of that meeting, understanding what their fee structure includes. Particularly, I'm interested in knowing what the community engagement piece looks like, what their kind of culture of community engagement is from both vendors.
Oh, with the two then, okay. I was
Yeah,
gonna
with
say,
the-
that
yeah.
one- so,
No, just the two. I agree.
perfect.
Piggybacking on Tom, I think, yeah, let's look at two, but I'm very interested in what their model is for community engagement. I'm looking for something that's not just survey, but has some other.
and they spell that out in the
piece of it.
plans, but you're suggesting we put them in a side-by-side?
Yeah, let's do a side by side and compare, and I am all for meeting them. The other thing I was going to suggest, and this will be at your discretion, Mrs. Austin, but key preparing for this strategic plan work would be to everybody be very familiar with their prior strategic plan. So a bit of homework that I think would be really valuable going into the process.
And I hope that, please speak up if anybody wants more than two, because we truly just want everyone to feel heard on the board and to be able to have good dialogue. And so if anybody wants more than two, we'll put together whatever you want us to put together.
Lawrence?
Yeah, a quick question regarding, so do we have any budget, how much we want to spend for this kind of project, strategic planning?
That's up to us.
So
That's
we'll-
our
we'll-
decision. I mean, if we
I
choose.
mean, you don't want to spend $100,000.
No, I don't think that
you-
would be responsible, but that's up to us.
I would actually ask that you don't.
And
Yeah.
that's why,
What is it?
that's why
Michelle
there's,
doesn't want us to
she
spend.
doesn't want us to, neither do I. So that's actually why the three of us ruled one out. That was one that when we met with them, they had good processes and ideas comparable to the other two. But we felt like,
I mean, we could see like the MSD Warren and Wayne, them spending like that much money, but not necessarily here.
and not even necessarily in MSD Warren and Wayne, unless they were looking for delving in deeper. Like one of the corporations where I spoke with the superintendent, they used COVID money to further delve in because they were coming out of COVID. And so they wanted to go much deeper than what I think we would go through today. So
Yeah,
I think we're looking more 20 to 40,000.
Yeah, also another thing, basically we spent 40,000. So what's the expectations of deliverables from the vendors?
That's where we'll put the side by side, as Mrs. Witt suggested for you. And then if, as Mr. Schott requested, if you guys decide 2 or 3 that you want to interview, we can work together to develop specific questions, and we can engage in dialogue with them through a Zoom conference in executive session. And they're each very eager to do that with you.
Yeah, I think probably I'm just thinking when we put everything together, I like that tables, but probably we need to also list what is their deliverables for such price.
Absolutely.
And then we can compare that. For example, this unified leadership, their most expensive one. But if you look at their deliverables, they have ambassadors to all stakeholders, so they get more people involved. They have strategic planning, and they also have implementation coachings, and also leadership development. So there's a lot of things. So maybe we can ask them, maybe break them down or something. That's maybe another things. And yeah, so I saw you have top 3, top 2 recommendations. Personally, opinion, just I just look at them. I think whatever you recommend, the Sky Bond, right? It's called Sky Bond.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's one aligned with our so-called GPS, right? Graduate prepared to success. And that's just my personal opinion. I think probably that's a recommendation makes sense to me. And also the follow-up questions regarding these so-called GPS. My understanding is still keep changing. So do you have any opinions or reflections regarding what this will be, the impact of these kind of things on our school? I mean, in the future, long terms, because this one will be kind of a long-term impact. So do you have any
strategic planning or the GPS?
Yeah, in terms of the strategic plans, also generally speaking of our schools.
I think
Once we finish.
we'll use the strategic
How we
plan.
use the strategic.
It will become a guide for us as a board and administration to be unified in a direction that we're going with a roadmap, and it will involve the entire community input. There will be opportunities for the entire community to provide input. Is that what you were asking?
No, I'm not sure if sorry, I didn't make myself clear probably. Because they have graduate prepared to success, right? The GPS, they're working on that, in my understanding.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering, what is your opinions or your reflections regarding the long-term impact of these kind of things on our school and also our right now the strategic planning we're
So
working
it
on?
will have an impact, and I'm going to talk about that briefly in my superintendent update. No, I thought you were going to. I thought that's the direction you were going. So I'm glad you're asking it. And I'm going to share with you a presentation that Mrs. Roth and I heard during a superintendent conference, and that Mrs. Austin heard during an ISBA conference, that I think you'll want to review based on the points that I make, and then you'll have an opportunity to provide feedback to the Indiana Department of Education, and I think you should. And the public will have an opportunity to, and we're going to send out messaging in our newsletter, but we wanted to share with you first.
Okay.
But I also think, to answer the second part of your question, that it does need to be a part of the strategic planning.
Yeah, that's
Because
what I'm
we want to make sure that our community is heard and that we understand what we want to place emphasis on based on the GPS and how courses may or may not be included as a required course. And so we have to think about that. We have to think about what that means to our students that we are graduating. And I'll share a little more about that at the end of our meeting.
Okay, that's
Great
fair
questions.
enough. Thank
you.
you.
Rachel.
From my standpoint, just as a historical perspective, strategic plan is kind of the mega version of that annual planning that we do. And so this is the one that sets the long range goals, and it's 20 times that summer meeting. Which does lead me to one question. If we're kind of launching into strategic planning, the plan would still be that we would have our annual planning meeting at the start of the school year or this summer,
So-
or would we bypass that for this?
We would bypass that most likely for this unless our board president tells us otherwise. And then, which would be the board talking with the board president. And then we would do our annual focusing on that, keeping that strategic plan alive. Each year I envision us coming together and reviewing, focusing on that strategic plan.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Daisha.
Would this involve, or could we do ahead of time, a climate audit? So back in 2014, we did a climate audit. And to me, it would be helpful to kind of, number one, I actually think it'd be helpful to have a work session and review that climate audit and see, what did we learn from that one? Review our current strategic plan to say, some of these things I can say, yep, I think we've done it. Nope, we haven't done that. A lot of this is behind the scenes. So to me, it'd be helpful to understand our current one, where we're at. And then I guess maybe it's even asking, is that part of the strategic that we're paying is a climate audit?
I would guess, good question. I would suspect, and we could ask that when we interview.
Okay.
But I would suspect having a climate audit be a part of that could be very helpful.
Okay.
The other, regarding the previous strategic plan, as you'll recall, I got here in COVID, and as we're coming out
Right.
of COVID, our team really hasn't done much of anything with that plan. And when I was interviewed a few years ago. It was my understanding from the board that it kind of didn't go much further once COVID came and it came to a halt. And by then, it was at the end. And so we all realized it was time for another strategic plan.
So I mean, that it totally makes sense. This wasn't you setting it up. A lot of these dates, were I guess it'd be helpful to know is the plan that we already put in place where is that at before we try to move on to the next one? Like having a recap of where do we stand today with all of these goals that were set previously and strategies, and have that kind of discussion to me is helpful to know before we start moving on to the next step. But I don't know, like I said, the climate audit also, just as I was looking at the April one, it's just as helpful to see what did they find then, what was helpful, and see how this is going to all work together.
Sure.
In my view, those all go together.
I think Rachel has something to say on that.
I was just going to say climate audits are extremely expensive. They're expensive in terms of the outside consultant piece, but they're also expensive in terms of staff labor. So how we did them previously, it was one school at a time. They were prioritized based on anticipated needs in those areas. And they happened over the course really of, as I'm recalling, 2 years. Is that right, Brad? Yeah, 2.5 years. So I think that it might make sense if it came out. I mean, I understand a strategic plan conversation is really a gathering of all the different viewpoints and developing a plan to set the course for the future. And I wouldn't be surprised if a climate audit would be one of the things that would appear in a strategic plan. But going through and getting, 4 years ago, we had a major event that really derailed our strategic planning process. And I'm really grateful to you for bringing it back on track, Dr. Greiner. But I would not want to spend the money not letting the strategic, to me, the strategic plan is the horse, and a climate audit might be something on the wagon that the horse is pulling.
Yeah, and that's where we might, when we're interviewing, talk about how could that look. And Mrs. Mumford, during conversations we had with vendors, they asked about the plan. And so that'll be a part, revisiting that, talking about it, what happened, what didn't happen. Stakeholders, board, administration will have an opportunity, community, to visit where are we with that, and so that can be incorporated. So I think all of that, everything that everyone's talking about here can be decided along the way once we decide the direction we're going.
Helpful, thank you.
You're welcome.
I've also already asked Mrs. Julian to put that on box so that it's easy to locate and everyone can review the previous strategic plan in time for next month.
Okay, it's actually on the website too, just so you know.
That's helpful.
It's pretty helpful.
Yeah,
I
just figured
but thank you.
it'd be nice to have it right where we
Yeah,
have the
thank you.
things. Okay, what I'm hearing is that we're all comfortable with Dr. Greiner getting more information from his top two and choosing between those two,
To clarify our top.
all of
We're
your collaborative top two. Okay, great.
Top two though? We're going, okay.
And we don't need to vote because that's info. Okay.
Okay.
All right. On another just minor small topic, let's talk about preschool.
For high-quality early learning, our administrative team has put together a proposal, and we request that the board approve the proposed preschool pilot classroom at the elementary for 2024-2025, ending in 2026. So this would be a 2-year pilot. All of the information for the proposal was shared in the board packet. And this would be one preschool classroom for our staff and community. And at the same time that I ask you to consider this, I would also like to thank these many staff members who have asked great questions and provided good ideas to shape the proposal. If approved, we look forward to, no, Mrs. Delaney has said preschool leadership possibility team, and we look forward to taking next steps. So at this time, I would recommend that this proposal be approved.
Okay, I need a motion, please. Moved by Rachel, seconded by Tom. Any discussion? Okay. Oh, Lawrence.
Yeah, I have a quick question.
I hear you, Yui. I'll get to you in just a second.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, my understanding, there's a assessment called kindergarten readiness assessment. So maybe 1 year later, when we evaluate this pilot program, are we going to take that into consideration?
The elementary is looking currently at the kindergarten readiness assessment that will be offered by the state to consider implementing it. So if the decision is to implement it, then definitely we would. The other product that will be available from the state, once again, if it's decided to be implemented, is a preschool assessment currently used for students with special needs called iSprout. That will be available for free as well. And so we will have some good options to gather high-level data that would be normed across the state to understand where students are.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else? Oh, Yui, yes.
May I ask a question?
Yep.
So yeah, I noticed that discount will be given to staff members, which is great. But the discount is only given to the month May. And sounds to me that is based on assumption that people will register their kids for the whole year. What if some staff members only register their child for one semester?
We would be able to.
Half a year, let's say, and how can, not including May, and then how can that person get a discount?
We would be able to prorate. It is important that we charge a consistent fee throughout the year for the sake of getting vouchers in the future. So if a qualifying staff member registered their child later, if there were spaces, that staff member would be able to get the prorated discount for May. If the person were no longer in the program, then the person would not receive the discount.
Okay, so they have to register their child in May in order to get the discount in May.
The student would have to still be registered in May.
So all the other months they won't get a discount.
Correct. The reason we've done it that way is because we need to charge a consistent weekly rate in order to be consistent with charging all students the same rate. And so essentially what happens is in May, students would not be charged.
Oh, okay. So basically we cannot do the discount every month. We have to do it only in 1 month.
Correct. We could do it a variety of ways, but we decided to do it that way for the sake of billing and simplifying the billing process. Other than that, we'd be charging staff another rate if we did it on a monthly, because it turns out that it's 1 month saved, which is 1/10. And so then we'd have to charge 1/10 savings. We'd have to charge 90% every month, which then creates 2 fee structures, which we would not be permitted to do and still qualify for the FSSA voucher eventually.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, anything else? Great. All those in favor of adopting the pilot proposal, please indicate, please be Tom, doing a roll call.
Yui, your vote, please.
Okay, yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Brad? Rachel?
Yes.
Daisha?
Yes.
Lawrence? 7-0.
7-0. I even looked at it. It says RC, and I was like, gosh, that sounds good. I haven't had pop in a while.
Thank you. I think we're all very excited, and we really appreciate the support. And I know we've got some excited community members.
So many years that we've been talking about it.
Yeah.
Literally, it's come up every year, so.
I'm the next item on the agenda too.
Please.
So the next item on the agenda, item 14, is textbook adoption. The proposal that you have is a proposal that I bring to you on behalf of the teachers that were involved in that adoption and the parents and everyone who was involved in that adoption. The final recommendation for the teacher curricular materials were done by the teacher adoption team, and those are shared in the board packet as well, along with information on cost and the process. I do thank all of the teachers who participated in the review, as well as all of the parents who provided feedback on their considerations for the survey, the parents that provided feedback when they came in to review the materials, and then public comment as well. We did not get that, but that was an option out there as well. So at this point, I recommend that the presentation, the proposal as presented, be approved by the board.
Okay, I need a motion, please. Moved by Brad, seconded by Lawrence. Any discussion on the textbook adoption, Rachel?
I need you to know this is probably the most complete, comprehensive presentation I've ever seen, and it's beautiful. It really laid it out for me in a way that I could understand, and I appreciate it. I also know that after this passes tonight, textbook adoption years are always hard the next year because our staff have to then change everything they do to align with the new textbook materials. And so I wanted to just call that out and let that be heard, because I really appreciate the work that they have to do and keeping their content relevant and the best that they can have. And I know next year's their hard year, so thank you all for doing that work.
We will have some stipends available if teachers opt to train during the summer. We've got one group of teachers that we know would prefer to have it as soon as possible. And I believe in the past, the high school has preferred to sit with it for a while. But did you guys want to train as soon as possible, or do you want to sit with it and train later?
Training in the online platforms and how to use them.
Okay. So we will have stipends if teachers want that to happen during the summer. We will have some options there.
Thank you for thinking of that.
And I'm also very excited because the K-5 adoption reflects the science of reading, which both the elementary and the intermediate have been working hard on. And this gives them quality materials to put that into play without the teachers having to do that lift.
Great, thank you. Lawrence?
Yeah, just a quick question, but at first I appreciate teachers and school leadership. This kind of effort need a lot of coordinations, also participate with parents, several people involved. I think the book is long list, so I just read that. It's really a big effort for our school. I appreciate their works. My question is, the total cost is something like $380,000 for these materials. So I just wondering why we don't need to go through this bidding process.
You want to answer that, or you want me to?
I'll let you. Okay.
Well, textbook kind of does go through a process. It's kind of a request for proposal process. It's a process set by the state, and that's why it does not, because we really do kind of meet the requirements because a committee meets together. There's community feedback to go through that process, and we fit what best fits our district. You don't necessarily want to go with the cheapest when you're looking at curriculum. You want to go with best fit. Okay.
Yeah, I'm still wondering because there's the books, several publishers have the books, but
and frankly, just to be honest, with over the years, most publishers, they're all kind of similar. They're all kind of around the same price. Sometimes you can work with some to get some free things as opposed to others. Especially when they know that it's a big adoption year, like everybody's doing science of reading right now, they all come out the woodwork, and they all kind of price each other about the same. So it really is about that committee getting together to decide which one is best for them. Okay.
Another question. So my understanding is these curriculum materials can be used for maybe 6-8 years, something like that. My understanding is every year we can get some compensation from state, $150 per student or something like that. So basically my question is during the years, we use this textbook, we can get compensated.
So that textbook reimbursement is just based upon what you pay that year. So I will only be able to turn in reimbursement for what we pay for this curriculum this year. I can't spread that out over multiple years. Now, I am doing the lease I'm going to be talking about. I am spreading that out as a lease over 4 years. A lot of times you don't necessarily do that with curriculum because you're kind of adopting stuff all the time. So, you don't really want to lease that because then you're just going to have another lease the next year, another lease the next year, and you're just going to keep adding to it. Okay?
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, so
And so,
basically.
so this is a position, and I can share more information with you guys later on what that looks like in my closing comments, but the state is putting us in a position where we're not going to get reimbursement for everything that we have to spend. We will be doing a jot form to turn in what different fees that we're charging, like field trips and things like that. But also we turn in by grade level the actual cost, what we're spending on curricular materials. So I hope at some point they look at those things.
Okay. But we can, at least we can get some compensation from the
Yes.
state.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, thank you.
I mean, because reading in English can be like $150 a student just for that, let alone everything else you're buying.
I do want to call attention to, our teachers do look to see if there's anything new that they do need. There are some courses for which they decided they didn't care to adopt anything new because they thought the materials they had still fit the bill and still met student needs. So.
And just by the sheer fact, if you're using it in a school, I think they mark it up like 50%.
Okay, gotcha, thank you.
Yui, what were you going to ask?
Yes, I have a question about the review. First of all, I really appreciate that parents are invited to volunteer to review the curriculum materials. Second, I also appreciate those 29 parents who volunteered to do so. And so given that there are so many curriculums for so many grades, I wonder at the end, how many parents were involved to review the materials?
So when we sent out the initial survey, we had 2 parents that were for the elementary and 2 parents that were for Willis and 4 for the junior senior. So that's a total of 8 parents. And that number was decided upon based upon the number of teachers involved because we wanted to keep in mind that teacher involvement. And we also did not want to overwhelm parents. We get a limited number of materials for review. So we knew that we had to kind of keep a organized structure, if you will.
Okay, thank you.
Rachel.
I will say that, Dr. Yin, though, the feedback that parents, even if they weren't selected randomly for that involvement, that feedback was still shared back with those committees. And I think they took it to heart. I mean, and that was K through 12. So the feedback K through 12 was shared with all teachers, even if they were just at the high school level or the elementary level.
Okay, Rachel.
Mrs. Cron, it seemed to be a little bit of a vague, I want to make sure that it's just absolutely crystal clear. The process that you've used to make this recommendation to us to approve this curricular material purchase is completely compliant with state law.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Look at me remembering that Tom is going to take a roll call vote. Good job.
Yui,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Brad,
Yes.
Rachel,
Yes.
Daisha, Lawrence,
Yes.
and I'm yes.
Okay,
7-0.
super.
Again, thank you. I know it's a huge lift for teachers the next year, but it's also exciting to have materials that are updated and that you think students will find engaging and relevant. As a professional educator, that's just kind of, it's like Christmas. So thank you on behalf of all the teachers who will have Christmas this next year. Thank you.
They may not feel like it's Christmas though at the beginning of the year.
I always love my text.
Yes.
And I am, again, you get to hear from me a lot this evening, so thank you for bearing with me. And this is another one that I am especially excited about. This is a grant that you are asked to approve. It is the North Central Health Services Preventing Youth Suicide Grant. The district has been awarded this grant, and the initiative will provide guidance for participating schools, and which would include district team members and school team members, and we hope to involve some community in the later part of the parents in the later part of the grant through a 2-year structure. I actually had the first meeting just recently, so it starts now, and then it continues through June 2026, and that structure provides planning, implementing, and sustaining prevention efforts in schools and districts. And once again, this is focused on preventing youth suicide. It allows for Tier 1 type interventions, that could be school-wide. It also allows for some tier 2 type programming and some tier 3 type programming. It gives staff the support through outside technical assistance to be able to understand different programs. That same technical assistance gives staff the support to be able to go and say, hey, this is our circumstance. What have you heard or what have you seen? And we would also be working with a cohort of local schools. We would be in the second cohort for this grant. Grant funds are in the amount of $60,450. And before anyone asks, this was one of the first questions, we cannot use it to pay for staff. We can do for stipends, but we can't use it to pay for a position, because that was one of the first things we thought of, mental health position. But regardless, I think principals and counselors that kind of have been on the initial discussion about do we want to move forward with this grant are very excited. So I request that the board approve this, the acceptance of this grant as is outlined in the board packet.
Okay, thank you. I need a motion, please.
So moved.
Moved by Brad, seconded by Rachel. Any discussion? Flip over to Yui. Okay, Tom?
Huey, vote.
Yes.
There we go.
Amy,
Yes.
Brad,
Yeah.
Rachel,
Yes.
Daisha,
Yes.
Lawrence,
Yes.
yes, 7-0.
Again, thank you. In our former district, we were involved in a youth resilience grant from North Central Health Service, and it had very positive impacts for staff and for students and families. So thank you.
I think it's super that we're working so hard on making sure our kids' mental health is preserved and protected. Next up, we have Michelle with the bus maintenance agreement.
TSC is willing to renew our current maintenance agreement at the same terms and costs, which we greatly appreciate that they didn't raise that. We will have one additional bus eventually this year once it is delivered. There is a flat fee annually of $4,625 per bus that covers electrical hookups if needed on the TSC lots, wear and tear on TSC equipment and servicing our buses, administrative overhead, the use of their spare buses if needed, if ours is getting serviced, and professional technical support. Additionally, we pay for the actual cost of maintaining the buses, including fuel, supplies, repairs, services, and labor. Considering that we do not have our own bus maintenance barn nor our own mechanics, the annual cost we pay is still a benefit to us, and I'm grateful they will continue to do that for us. Please approve the renewal of our bus maintenance agreement with TSC for the 24-25 and 25-26 school year. They actually already approved theirs last Wednesday, and so we have the signed version from them that you could sign off on this evening if this is approved.
Okay, thank you. I need a motion, please. Moved by Tom, seconded by Lawrence. Any discussion about the bus agreement?
Excuse me?
How many buses?
16 regular, 4 activity.
20? Okay.
I have some questions.
Okay. Go ahead.
First of all, I appreciate that the TSC is willing to provide the service for us. But I have to admit, I'm pretty naive about this kind of service because I don't have other reference to compare with. But sounds like we actually right now, we don't need to park any of our bus there. And if we need a service, maintenance or repair, whatever, we still need to pay for them.
We pay for the
those
actual,
services.
yes, the
So
actual
just,
services, yes.
Yeah, I wonder what's a common chart? Because it's small districts like ours, I guess it's not rare. And I wonder how other districts handle their buses and how much do they pay to get those services? Because it sounds to me for the 4,600 per bus per year, we are not getting much.
Well,
because we still need to, whenever we need a real service.
I can tell you that if we had our own bus maintenance barn as well as the mechanics to run those, we would be paying a lot more than we're paying now for those services because all your buses need servicing multiple times during the year. They need to have their oil changed. They need to be inspected. They need to have everything looked at fluids, things. I mean, I'm not an expert myself here, so I'm not going to jump into that. The $46.25 is just a flat fee that they charge regardless of whether or not we decide to use the electrical hookups, but that is there in case maybe we have some electrical hookups here at the Happy Hollow parking lot. So if something were to happen and we didn't have electric running out here or something, the TSC lots would be available for us to use those. As you know, our buses are at multiple places, so it'd be really hard for us to put everything in one place here right now. Even if we had a barn, we don't have a big enough space to kind of put everything. And so that is what they are offering to us. And I do know that, you know, if Doug is ever gone, the transportation director at TSC kind of actually fills in for him. If there is like an accident or something that happens, he actually fills in for Doug for us. And I don't believe we're charged extra for that. So, yeah. Yeah.
I also noted on here, oh, sorry, Yue, were you done or you have another?
So now for the flight fee, it's with 20 buses, that's 92,000, right?
Yeah.
92,000 per year.
Which is what I paid for mechanic at Coke.
And so that, it sounds.
Yeah, I know it sounds like a lot of money, but like I said, I paid that for one mechanic at Kokomo.
But I wonder how other school districts handle this and how.
Well, other school districts have their own transportation barn and their own mechanics. We do not.
Even the smaller ones?
Yes.
Yeah, some smaller ones do. Some smaller districts contract out their buses and their drivers actually own their buses and contract routes.
Example in Montgomery County, where two of us came from, South Montgomery School Corporation, North Montgomery School Corporation, and Crawfordsville Community Schools. Crawfordsville is similar to our size. All three have their own bus barn, as Michelle's
You had
calling
room
it.
for it.
Yeah, but we had space for it or it was built and so we had our own mechanics. Each of those districts have their own mechanics and they have the space to service their buses. If they didn't, then you'd have to outsource that like what we do here at Westside.
And even a lot of times with our own mechanics at Kokomo, I believe we had 4 mechanics on staff. We still had to have service done from outside agencies on our buses because they still couldn't do everything either. So
what you're saying is this is a pretty good deal.
I feel like it's a pretty good deal, yes. Considering what I am used to paying, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Good to
then we
know.
do not have to do our
I don't
own
have that
fuel
knowledge, so I'm.
purchases.
Kind of curious.
That's a plus as well,
Okay,
because we
thanks.
don't have anywhere to put it.
Yeah, you can't just have a tank and
Yeah.
that sitting around.
Yes.
Rachel?
I had 2 questions for you. One is, I know that this is not the first time we've seen this agreement. How long have we had this agreement in place? I'm certain I've voted on it at least.
Quite a while.
Yeah.
I don't know the history of that. I am so sorry, but I know it's probably been here for quite a while.
Yeah.
We had it with City Bus prior to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that certainly I've voted on it multiple times
Yeah.
over the years, so I'm
Yeah.
grateful for that longevity of the relationship. The other is, I noticed on here that there is a provision for spare bus, should we have issues with our vehicles and whatever. Have we utilized that? to
Yes,
your
we
knowledge?
have quite a few times, yes.
And so there would not be, that would be a very expensive option if we did not have this relationship with TSC.
Yes, we
So
would
to have a
to
backup
purchase another
support,
bus, yes.
right? Yeah.
Which are running about $180,000 to $200,000 right now.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Have I gotten a motion on this one? Okay, I think you're ready to roll call.
Vote?
Okay, yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Rachel?
Yes?
Daisha?
Yes.
Lawrence?
Yes.
I'm a yes. 7-0.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And we're back to you for the technology purchase.
The Technology Department is requesting permission to purchase 700 new Chromebooks for the junior-senior high school one-to-one program for the beginning with the 24-25 school year through a lease option for 4 years through Trifera. The cost of each Chromebook is approximately $397 plus additional costs for a 4-year warranty and Google licensing through that lease. We would prefer to do the dollar buyout option lease for $77,180 annually, as we believe we'd be able to retire older computers across the district at that time and then replace them with these machines after 4 years. Trafera is offering us the contract through the Indiana Approved Educational Shopping Cooperative, which is one of our purchasing options, which has gone through, they have gone through the bid process for schools across Indiana to use. So I actually have the documentation that they have all of that. The annual cost of the Chromebooks will be paid from the Curricular Materials Fund right now, and then it'll move to the Education Fund later because of state code. Depending upon the curricular adoption schedule over the next 4 years, state reimbursements may or may not cover that total cost of everything we adopt each year. Anything not covered by the state reimbursement will have to come from the Education Fund, as these computers are for student use. So please approve the lease of the Chromebooks as submitted so that we can continue our program.
I need a motion, please. Moved by Brad, seconded by Rachel. Any comments? Daisha?
I can't remember. Have we done this in the past? For some reason, I have Chromebooks on my mind.
Yes.
Did we do the same thing? Yeah. Was it leasing? Is that what I'm remembering? Okay, so it's just renewing the lease or starting a new lease?
Starting a new one.
It's a new cycle.
Yep.
Okay. And did we do 700 before, or how do you decide 700?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Luckily, Brandon is here, so we can answer those questions.
I knew it was somewhere, but I couldn't find it, so thank you.
Yui, do you have anything?
And so, and for any outdated equipment, how do we deal with them?
How do we deal with outdated equipment?
Do you recycle or?
I mean, we'll go through them and evaluate that.
Brandon says they go through them and evaluate that.
They evaluate machines to see if they can still be used. If not, we do recycle those. Or we do not return them back into the lease. We don't purchase them, correct? Yeah, because we are leasing them. We have the buyout option at the end of the lease. I'm not sure what was done previously for that, if it's the dollar or the. Okay, so if they're in good condition, we could pay for the lease that's coming up, the fair market value for each machine. Or if we don't want to purchase them, we turn them back over to the company that we lease them from.
Anything else?
Okay, so yeah, I wonder, so in the case, I'm not sure what the situation is in our schools, but in our college, and I heard from the technicians that sometimes they have to dispose the old equipment, even though some of them are still functioning. I'm not sure whether it's a case in our district and whether K-12 and higher education are the same, but I wonder whether we are allowed, if we have computers like that, whether we are allowed to give them away to kids who don't have computers at home to use.
So if we are leasing, they're technically not ours unless we purchase them at the end of the lease. If they've been purchased through a grant, we are not allowed to give them away because we use grant funds to buy them, which we have used grant funds in the past couple of years to buy machines.
Correct.
Yeah, that sounds the same to the higher education. I feel, wow, that's a waste. And because there are students who don't have computers, on the other hand, the university are not allowed to give the computers to kids who need computers.
Talk to your legislators.
Additionally, though, I would say additionally that we typically would use equipment to the end of its useful life, or what we would consider its useful life.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that helps, but.
We have plenty of places to put them across the district if they're still working.
And we find alternative things to do with them, like old Chromebooks, we'll turn them into like a kiosk station for printing.
And I believe our students are able to check out the computers to take home at the elementary and intermediate levels.
Currently, our loaner locker system at the junior senior utilizes older devices.
Yep.
So.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
And also thank you, Brandon, for setting up the meeting for me.
Thank you, Brandon.
Anything else? Okay, I need a motion. We already have that. I need a roll call.
Yuli, your vote?
Yes.
Yes.
Andy, Brad?
Yes.
Rachel?
Yes.
Rachel?
Yes.
Lawrence? Yes.
Okay.
7-0.
Great. And one more time to you for the
One more time and you'll stop and you won't hear any more from me tonight. An object breakdown is included in your board packets for expenses during the period of April 4th through May 3rd. I have also included 2 fund reports for you this month. The first is the month-end final fund report for March after all revenue and expenses have been posted and the bank has been reconciled. School Corporation ended the month of March with $19,414,406 in all funds and $5,081,816 in the education fund. I've also included the preliminary fund report for April as normal, but we're still in the process of posting the revenue and reconciling for that month. So it's not final yet. Sorry, I stopped up tonight. I probably sound awful. I apologize. Southern Indiana gave me a sinus infection. So Dr. Greiner and I attended the Indiana Association of School Business Officials annual meeting last week to partake in professional development, covering all aspects of school business and operations. As always, it's a great experience to spend time with our colleagues, networking and learning. And right now, it's the calm before the storm of the end of the school year and fiscal year end reporting that will start in June and July. So,
Okay, thank you. For my information to the board, I want to point out that next month our work session will be shortened due to the recognition for our retirees. And we've already done a first reading on policies A125, nepotism, A175, whistleblower protection, A200, firearms, A225, reporting of suspected child abuse, A250, tobacco, and A325, communicable diseases. So it's my intention to bring those back for a second reading next month if we can get through them. If you have any suggestions on any of those 6, please let me know by email and we will endeavor to get it taken care of ahead of time. Dr. Greiner.
I have 3 items to report out on, upcoming dates, new proposed graduation requirements, and transfers. So upcoming dates, tomorrow night, the city of West Lafayette has scheduled an early childhood education forum. The community of West Lafayette has worked regarding understanding community needs. And so this is based on a study that the city conducted with the support of TSC and West Lafayette schools. The meeting, as I said, is tomorrow night at 6 p.m. and it will be held at the council chambers. As we near the conclusion of the 23-24 school year, you can rest assured that our last day is May 22nd. Next Wednesday.
Unless it snows.
Unless we have a snow day. That's correct. They are not laughing. Graduation then is Friday, May 24th at 6 p.m. in the high school gymnasium.
Okay.
So newly proposed graduation requirements, which is what Mr. Wong was talking about earlier. I wanted to give you a quick update regarding the proposed changes to graduation requirements. The Indiana Department of Education is looking to be the first in the nation to quote unquote transform education. Changes will result in 2 diplomas and more flexibility in meeting graduation requirements with fewer courses. There are some benefits for students who may struggle to get credits, but educators have some major concerns related to rigor, as well as the timeline of the new diplomas, which would start in 2029, this year's 7th graders. We encourage board members to review the information and provide comments to the State Board of Education through a QR code that is available in a PowerPoint that I'm going to share in box after tonight's meeting. We'll have Roberta put that in box for us. And to recap, we are going to share the slides from the presentation that Mrs. Roth and I attended through IAPSS, Indiana Association of Public School Superintendents. And Mrs. Austin also heard something similar and engaged in dialogue with ISBA. Your feedback, as I said, is encouraged. The information can be found in the Indiana Department of Education website by searching GPS diploma presentation, or you can type GPS diploma presentation IDOE. Our office does plan to send this information to the community as well, but we wanted to give this information to you first in today's board meeting. We'll include it in our school newsletter. Transfers. I was asked to speak on the process of transfers from TSC, as it is that time of the year where we are entertaining such requests. We are technically, as you know, a closed district, closed to transfers, but we have an informal agreement with TSC. That information can also be found on our website as well as TSC's website to provide educational services to students. These students are counted as TSC students for funding from the state. West Lafayette is accountable for attendance and achievement of the students. And then West Lafayette turns around and bills TSC for the cost of educating the students based on actual expenditures at the end of each school year. Procedures for consideration of educational services at West Lafayette schools from TSC include the TSC family contacts TSC Superintendent's Office and requests in writing to attend West Lafayette schools. Applications are submitted to TSC by April 1st of each year for priority consideration. If the TSC Superintendent approves the request, then the application is sent to West Lafayette School Office. The principal then reviews the application, and the attendance and discipline records are also considered. And we also take into account our current class numbers at each grade level. If a student is accepted, TSC and the family are notified. TSC works with the family on their agreement for payment. West Lafayette Schools does not bill families. That concludes my report.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think engaged in dialogue is a really nice way of saying how I felt about the new graduation requirements.
ISBAs.
So particularly with her student here and being a foreign language teacher, that's one of the requirements that they have eliminated, which means that our own graduates in Indiana wouldn't be eligible to attend our Indiana public universities, which is bonkers in my opinion. So I hope that everyone will engage with the IDOE on that. And so with that, I'll send it to Yui and your GLASS report, please.
Okay, thanks.
Just one second. Yeah.
So, okay, so let me see. Last year, there was an overall increase of 106 students, resulting who needed a special education service, resulting from the combination of moving students and new evaluations and the preschoolers. In second, there are 40 contracted positions in different departments at both full and part-time status. And those positions will be on district websites. And basically there's recruiting. So for those who are interested in those positions, please check the website of different school districts. And another update is TSC actually is conducting a study to see whether they may set up their own surveys. Basically, they might be separated from the GLASS co-op, but it's uncertain yet. And right now, they are doing a study to see whether it will make more sense for them to have their separate surveys. And future dates for the governing board member meetings in 2024 to 2025 will be September 17th, November 12th, February 18th, April 15th, all at 2 o'clock in the afternoon in the Durgan training room. Yeah, that's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Lawrence, you had a question?
Yeah, a question regarding the transfers. I'm just wondering, so every year there are some students live in our district, but they transfer to another public school. So when they do this, we have a kind of a form. They fill in the forms, say why you go out to other schools, something like that. Do we have that?
Correct.
Yeah. So can we have the information and collective information share with board members? So I'm just curious, see why they leave to pick another public school or private school, whatever.
I think we can include that in a Friday notes, can't we? Mrs. Roth, we've got that where we can figure out how we want to provide that for them, but we absolutely. No, he's asking for, you know how we're now having students fill out that information? Family. We have it in a spreadsheet after
discussion before, so we could include that in a Friday notes, is what I'm saying.
Oh, okay, that's
for you.
good, that's good. Yeah, that's, we're just trying to understand why they are leaving, you know, what.
Yes, majority of them are leaving just because they're going to another location, but you will be able to see that clearly in the information we provide for you.
Okay, okay. Yeah, but just, that's okay, but there's some people still live in our district, but they kind of pick another.
There are some that do that too.
Yeah, so
yes.
that's, okay, thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Okay, Daisha, would you like to go ahead and give your report on the foundation?
Yes, the Public Schools Foundation, we had actually a community member, Bo Scott, and Willis teacher Amanda Fouch, who served on the grant committee and awarded spring grants. No one from West Lafayette applied, but they did have some great and impressive grants that they awarded. The reception will be Tuesday, May 14th at the Whitaker Inn, and all are invited. The cupcake run that they do is their big fundraiser is Sunday, September 22nd. So when we've had some pretty large, I think it was at the elementary school, one of the classes was one of their highest participants, those students and our teachers. So they do a great job supporting that. And then I did just have a follow-up question on the transfer students. I appreciate you, Dr. Greiner, sharing the process and making it very clear. Part of my question is on the website, the form like this that it shares, it says it's from 2017 to 2018, and it gives deadlines for the applications. Can we update that and so that it's more accurate, that it's a priority deadline, not so that some families are, you know, I have heard of families who are like, shoot, we missed the April 1st deadline, we can't do it.
Okay.
So that could be more accurate, as well as it says, you know, turn to your local school district and ask them, except for, did I understand correctly, we only do this with TSC.
We only do it with TSC. That's the only one that has that.
Has the agreement?
Yes. That's
So could we update the form just so that it's clear?
Yes.
For families, if that's okay. And then my last question is, as you're accepting it, is it still, you're just accepting anyone? It doesn't matter the grade size, large class size? Do you consider any of that as you're looking at?
We do
transfer
consider that, and there have been times where the answer has been in a certain grade level, we cannot, but we try to very carefully monitor that, because if we get to a point where we can add a classroom, and we're actually looking at a grade right now, and that'll be in your staffing report next month too, and we would add a teacher.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Lawrence, your committee report, please.
Sure, yeah. The park and recreation. The good thing is we have new youth development coordinators. So that's the most relevant to us. This coordinator take care the after-school programs and also summer camp things. So we have new permanent persons for this job. So that's good. And municipal pool is being prepared for the Memorial Day weekend opening. And they also have some summertime part-time vacancies. Say wellness center need 20 to 25 persons, and the whole department need 60 to 65 additional personnel. So they really need a lot of people for the summertime. And the farmer market start on May 1st. And also, I share our pre-K pilot classroom information last meeting. During the meeting, the board president, Dr. David Perura, shared some comments and questions, concerns about whether teachers, our school teachers and staff can get some discount for this program. So I understand we already have a solution. I will share this information with him, but I just want to faithfully pass his comments and concerns to our school board. That's all. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Rachel.
Just a few things to follow up on the GPS. I have only heard negative feedback on that process from community members. So I very much would appreciate having something I can forward or give to people when they contact me, or do that response form.
Okay.
There's a lot of communication about it right now.
It's easy too, because it's a QR code, so we'll make sure we get that out, but you'll see that and you'll see how to pass that along too.
That would be really helpful to be able to pass it along. In particular, I've heard a lot of concerns from parents about how early a child would need to pick their path.
Yep.
And similarly about the language and arts and culture piece of it as well. But it's really putting an unusual burden on children to know what they want to do when they grow up before they've really gotten fully into puberty. The other thing is, I'm sorry if it is in Friday notes and I've missed it. I think you've given us this information, but do you have a timeline for when you would be moving board offices or moving your central office?
I can give you a brief update, but I want to apologize that you said this about Friday notes, and thank you, Mrs. Mufford, for pointing that out. I apologize that I put Friday notes. You must have wondered where that was. I put it.
I found it, actually.
Somebody found it. Okay, well, apparently Mrs. Mufford
I found
did.
it.
It told me where it was. So anyone that hadn't found it, I apologize, and thank you, Mrs. Mufford, for making me aware of what I had done. Well, yeah. Oh, okay. Well, that's good to know.
Thinking clearly.
Put it a year later, didn't it? Or previous. The goal is to hopefully move over the summer, maybe July-ish. Priority will be on getting everything laid out the way it needs to be laid out. So board meetings, until we know that we can host a board meeting that you find acceptable, we will continue board meetings here. You're welcome.
Thursday, April the 18th, as Dr. Greiner has already kind of said. One was talking about anticipated staffing, and Dr. Greiner and representatives really had a nice conversation about what that looks like when it's watch versus go ahead and accept, and making sure that class sizes are as they best serve our schools and our students. In addition, I want to tell you that our principals, particularly at the elementary and intermediate school, went above and beyond to get 100% response on pre-enrollment surveys. So they kind of knew what students' plans were next year. So I was kind of impressed as they described that process. We reviewed sub-fill rates. Those are running 95 to 100% full. Some creative approaches to try and get AP proctors. So we talked about kind of the creativity in that. Talked a little bit about the safety plan, and expecting that that full kind of safety plan review will happen in the fall meeting, as it typically does. I want to say publicly, we all have heard, I'm sure at this point, about the new literacy endorsement that teachers are having to go through. And it's really quite impressive that Mrs. Roth and Dr. Greiner and the principals are also pursuing that same literacy certification and updating their own license, just as a show of support to teaching staff, so that everybody's on the same page and they don't feel like they're unsupported in it. And then finally, there was an update that the summative evals are going well and everything is on track, and I'm guessing is done or will be shortly done. It was mid-April, very close to that. And then it was really lovely. They ended with some kind of building level positive news. So it was really nice to have that be a great start or a great end to what has been a very productive school year.
Thank you. Appreciate your service on that. Tom?
April was the busiest month of the year for WLSCF. Hosted the 6th Wall of Pride induction events on April 11 and 12. You can read about this year's Wall of Pride class at WLSCF.org. Scarlet and Gray Dinner Auction on April 19 was a wonderful night of celebrating our school community and raising support for foundation initiatives. It was great to see so many board members in attendance and contributing. Dr. Munji Bawindi, class of 1978 and 2023 Nobel Prize recipient, presented to 400 students when he returned to visit on April 25th. He also met with approximately 50 students for an informal Q&A, followed by lunch with current science teachers and his teacher, Jim Guy. On May 23, WLCF will host the scholarship program and reception. This is different, and that is the day before graduation. This year, WLCF will award 37 scholarships to 32 different students, totaling $44,500. Community Council met April 22nd. Dr. Greiner and Mrs. Roth shared information about the preschool pilot proposal, other highlights for the various year-end activities going on at our schools.
Okay, Redevelopment Commission West Lafayette was held April 17th, 2024 at 8:30 a.m. City Council chambers. The next meeting is set up for this Wednesday, May 15th, 8:30, same location. Cason Park's moving right along. They've started construction on the third building, which is the event center. What you see up now, vertical, is the boathouse and the restroom. They continue to do soil work on that site. We've had some maintenance already for the John Dennis Wellness Center. We had a heat exchanger go out. We had to pay for that. It was almost 19 grand. And someone broke a window in the weight room for $7,000 repair. How about that? Big window, big window. After that, we approved buying more police cars. We're on kind of a regular rotation, and we're buying 100% hybrids now. So to save on fuel, and they're working out pretty well for the police department. And then last but not least, there is a bond issue of $5.5 million for the new project. It's the landmark project in the levee. That's where the campus inn and suites is, or in. It's going to come down. Bruno's, all that's going to come out, and a new apartment building's going to be there. 590 units, 1,390 beds. 21,000 square feet of retail space on the bottom floor. Oh, and they did create another TIF district. If you haven't seen enough TIFs already, we now have the Tapawango redevelopment area, which is a new 25-year TIF. And they're doing all that because they want more improvements in the levee, and it's all coming. So stick around.
Aren't you the TIFs set to retire?
Yeah, they're by statute, most of them are done in 15 years, but when they open a new one up, they have a 25-year life. They're kind of running out of dirt.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a lot of TIFs.
Yep.
Thank goodness for the, I almost said the reputation, but that's Taylor's. The referendum. I'm tired. Okay, we will have a work session prior to our regular meeting from 5 to 5:30 right here in the LGI room. Then we will celebrate our retirees, and our regular board meeting will be June 10th at 6 p.m. Last day of school, as we've said, is May 22nd. Everyone have a safe and wonderful summer. We'll see you at graduation on Friday, May 24th at 7 p.m. in the high school gym. And I think that's everything. So I need
Do you have a gather time for us?
I don't. That's a good question.
Usually at 6:30.
6:30. Let's call it 6:30. We'll gather. Where?
In the band room.
In the band room. What a good idea. That's completely new information.
Tradition.
Tradition. Okay, so 6:30 in the band.
6:30 in the band room.
Thank you for keeping me on track. I need a motion, please. Moved by Rachel,
Second.
seconded by Lawrence and Brad, all in favor of adjourning this meeting.
Really?
We are going to call it.
A roll call.
Yes.
Doing the roll call.
Amy,
Yes.
Brad,
Yes.
Rachel,
Yes.
Daisha,
Yes.
Lawrence,
Yes.
and the
And that's adjournment.
Nice work.
Thank you very much.